The Author's POV. Chapter 61, I am Kevin Voss, 3. Spurt. Appearing behind one of the guards patrolling the area, Kevin swiftly and silently slit his throat. Dragging the guard's corpse behind a bush, Kevin came back out wearing a black uniform and a hat. On his right pec, a white name tag rested on the uniform. After scouting all of the guards from the drone, Kevin had a general idea of the guard's movement pattern. Turning right, Kevin passed by another guard that was patrolling not so far away from where he was. Nodding his head to greet Kevin, the guard moved past Kevin. Spurt. Swiftly appearing behind the guard and silently slitting his throat, Kevin dragged his body away. Coming back out, Kevin replaced his previous name tag with the one of the guard he had just killed. The reason for his action was because certain guards were only allowed to patrol certain areas. If they found out that the guard that was supposed to be patrolling the outside perimeter was outside their designated area, they would no doubt become suspicious. Though he knew his plan wasn't going to last long, he would at least like to reach a certain point before bulldozing his way towards his target. Realistically, remaining hidden was not an option, but it's not like Kevin cared. He was that confident in his skill. Entering the villa, Kevin lowered the hat he was wearing, masking his face. Right now Kevin had to operate fast. His target already knew that he was on his tail. Previously, he had sent several scouting devices inside of the villa, and thus he knew exactly where Victor was hiding. However, despite the fact that their cloaking function was fairly good, they had all already been seen through by someone. Kevin estimated that whoever found the devices was at least E rank, if not even E+ rank. Only someone of that caliber could detect his scouting devices so quickly. Though he knew there was going to be someone of that level as the system had already warned him beforehand, he had to confirm for himself. And now he knew. Increasing his pace, Kevin walked in the direction of where he last detected Victor. He knew he couldn't waste any time. If he let the target escape, the next time he tried to assassinate him, chances were that he would be more prepared. Even worse, he would hide until Kevin had no choice but to return to the academy, preventing him from completing the mission. He had to kill him now at all costs. If not, there was not going to be a second chance. Turning left of the hall, Kevin passed by two guards who seemed to be in a rush. Hey! Hearing someone shouting in his direction, halting his steps, Kevin kept looking at the front. Morrison, what are you doing here? Jogging to where Kevin was, one of the guards looked at Kevin suspiciously. You shouldn't be here. We just got an emergency message regarding someone infiltrating the premise KH. Just as the guard was about to finish speaking, Kevin subtly looked at his name tag, Leo, and swiftly stabbed his heart. Supporting Leo's lifeless body with one arm so that he remained standing, Kevin pretended to converse with him. Halfway through his conversation, Kevin slightly loosened the grip of Leo's body, and it slowly sank in his direction. I know, someone ordered me to. Hey! Leo, are you okay? What's going on? Noticing something strange, the other guard that was accompanying Leo, whom Kevin had just killed, jogged in Kevin's direction. Using his shoulder to mask the blood that was slowly seeping from Leo's body, Kevin flusteredly spoke. I don't know. I was just talking to him when he suddenly just passed out in front of me. Hey, Leo. Arriving next to Leo, the guard gave him a gentle tap. Noticing a small red stain on the ground, the guard instantly felt that something wasn't right, but before he could react, a silver streak of light appeared before his heart. Spurt. Thud. Thud. Knowing that his cover would be blown any second, Kevin sprinted towards where Victor was hiding. Hey! Hey! As he was running, he met a couple of guards that tried to block his way. However, it was all futile. Stepping on the side of the wall, Kevin stabbed his sword in their direction. Noticing Kevin's action, the two guards immediately tried to block Kevin's attack. But suddenly out of nowhere, the sword that they assumed was coming from the front suddenly appeared on the side, completely catching them off guard. Spurt. Thud. Killing one of the guards, using the momentum he had from having propelled himself off the wall, Kevin somersaulted in the air and slashed towards the other guard. Flustered, the guard tried to block Kevin's attack, but similarly to the first guard, just as the sword was about an inch away from him, it suddenly appeared in a completely different direction, completely catching him off guard. Spurt. Thud. Without looking back, Kevin continued running and killing guards left and right as he bulldozed his way towards where Victor was. Stop right there. Just as Kevin was about to reach the room Victor was hiding in, a large towering man appeared before him, obstructing his path. A large pressure emanated from his body. Stopping, Kevin looked at him and said, "So you must be the one who found my scouters." Without answering Kevin, the towering man looked at him up and down. Frowning, a trace of astonishment appeared on his face. "E rank. How's this possible? You should be worried about something else instead of my rank." Appearing before Elder, Kevin drew his sword and slashed in his direction. "You dare!" Clang. Before Kevin's sword could hack at Elder, a giant axe appeared in his hand, perfectly blocking his attack. Catch. Taking a couple of steps back, Elder hacked his axe on the ground to stop himself from moving further backwards. Regaining his bearing, Elder solemnly looked at Kevin. "To be able to push me this far back, you're not half bad." Schwa. Without answering Elder, Kevin appeared on his left side and stabbed towards his head. Just as Elder was about to block Kevin's sword attack, midway through his motion he stopped and redirected his axe to the left side of his body. Cryik. KHHH. Barely managing to block Kevin's attack, Elder's axe grazed Kevin's sword. Though he managed to stop Kevin from stabbing him in the liver, a large gash appeared on his body. What kind of sword art is that? Dumbly looking at his wound, Elder looked at Kevin, who was a few steps away from him. Ignoring Elder, Kevin once again attacked. Schwa. Crick. Staring at the sword coming in his direction intently, Elder once again managed to barely deflect his attack. KHHH. Damn it. Holding on the side of his body, Elder took a quick potion from his pocket and downed it. Slowly, his injuries started healing. Schwa. Appearing on Elder's right side, Kevin's sword hacked towards his head, and a whistle arose as the sword split the air. Clank. Firmly blocking Kevin's true attack that was heading towards his heart, a smirk appeared on Elder's face. "You think I wouldn't be able to block it after the second time?" Using his enormous frame, Elder pushed Kevin back. Hooah. Raising his axe in the air, Elder firmly hacked it towards Kevin's direction. Sidestepping, Kevin tried to avoid the attack, however, midway through the air, Elder's axe twisted to the side in a J motion. Clank. Blocking the attack, Kevin felt all the bones in his body vibrate from the clash. Again. Raising his axe again, Elder once again hacked. Shua. Frowning, with his right hand holding the grip of the sword and his left hand holding the body of the sword, Kevin followed the axe's movement and redirected it to the ground. Bomb. Breaking the marble floor into millions of pieces, a large cloud of dust swept the area. Noticing the slight opening, Kevin decided to act. Swiftly turning the tip of his sword, a whistle arose. Kevin's momentum suddenly changed. His gentle attacks from before were long gone, and what replaced them were fiercer and heavier strikes that overwhelmed Elder. Following the heavier strikes, Kevin's sword became even harder to trace, as every single one of his attacks would look like the real deal. He would occasionally pretend to do a feint when in fact there was none. This was so that he could destroy Elder's mentality, increasing the chances of him making a mistake. Elder, who was under the barrage of attacks, could barely hold on as he used his giant axe as a shield. The fact that he couldn't rely on his sight made things that much harder for him. He had to pay extra close attention to the sound the sword made in the air, else he wouldn't know where the sword was coming from. KHHH, damn it. As he was being pushed back, Elder grit his teeth. Looking at Kevin, whose momentum was increasing by the second, Elder, who knew that this couldn't keep going anymore, decided to use his strongest move and end things. You leave me no choice. Suddenly, a black glow emanated from Elder's body as his muscles started bulging from his body. Kevin, who noticed these changes, immediately attacked him more fiercely, but it was to no avail, as Elder, who was struggling before, was starting to defend his attacks more accurately. He's using something similar to overdrive. Stopping his frontal attacks, as he knew it was useless, Kevin decided to rely on his agility and swiftly moved behind Elder's thick body. Noticing Kevin moving behind him, Elder turned around at an astonishing speed. The giant axe in his hands was covered in a thick black glow before Kevin knew it, and along with it, a supremely fierce and immense pressure bore down on Kevin, who was caught off guard. Wham! As soon as the axe slashed horizontally, Kevin felt the air and the surroundings vibrate intensively. It was so fast that it was impossible to dodge. Seeing that he couldn't dodge, Kevin met the axe head-on. Clang! A large shockwave swept the surroundings. Taking 10 steps back, Kevin felt an iron-like taste in his mouth. Spurt! After a couple of seconds, Kevin couldn't hold it anymore and spat a mouthful of blood. Wapa. Before Kevin had enough time to catch his breath, Elder's giant axe came swinging from above. Gotcha. Narrowly dodging the attack by a hair's breadth, Kevin saw the giant axe split the marble floor into dozens of pieces. In the end I have to use it, huh? Looking at Elder, who was preparing himself for another swing, Kevin closed his eyes and let out a long breath. Overdrive. As if all of his muscles had been rejuvenated, Kevin felt an unprecedented power rise from deep within him. Tensing his calves, Kevin appeared behind Elder. Thud. Slashing upwards, a head flew in the air and a massive body fell flat on the ground, sending debris all over the place. KHHHHHH. Deactivating overdrive, Kevin's muscles spasmed continuously. The pain was so strong that he barely managed to stop himself from passing out. In the end, he had to use overdrive. The side effects of using overdrive were currently too much for him. If not for the fact that he had no choice but to use it, he would have never used it. In the end, despite being stronger than Elder, his experience was still far lower than his. He wanted to win without needing to use overdrive, but in the end, without it, he wouldn't have been able to win. Gulp. 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 Gulping down a couple of potions, Kevin felt a little bit better, well enough to stand up. Looking around, Kevin walked towards Elder's headless body. Shah. Slashing towards Elder's hand, Kevin took it and headed towards a large wooden door. Beep. Placing his finger on the lock in front of the door, Kevin waited for the door to open before entering. Waiting on the other side of the door, Victor stood up and let out a sigh of relief. Only Elder can unlock the door, this means he succeeded, right? Click. As the door fully extended, Victor's smile froze as he saw two scarlet red eyes staring in his direction. Who are you? Slumping backwards, Victor trembled as he crawled backwards, as far away from Kevin as possible. Who am I? Looking at Victor's sorry figure, Kevin smirked. Extending his hand upward, he slowly hacked in his direction. Slash. Thud. Watching Victor's fat head rolling on the floor, Kevin slowly said, I am Kevin Voss. The Author's POV. Chapter 62, Resolve, 1. They say humans were adaptable creatures. Presented with an external scenario that changed their behavioral pattern or ways of life, humans were creatures that were able to adapt to the new changes presented to them. Compared to the other races, humans didn't have anything in particular that stood out for them. Dwarves were smart, elves had a high affinity with mana, and orcs had strong constitutions. Humans had none of that. They didn't have the dwarves' intelligence, the elves' strong affinity with mana, nor did they have physiques as strong as the orcs. They were merely a bunch of evolved primates in the eyes of the three races. Yet, after around 70 years, to the surprise of the three races, humanity had almost caught up with them. Though they weren't particularly outstanding in a single area, after adapting to the new changes around them, they were able to swiftly become a powerhouse that could comfortably defend their territory from the likes of demons and the other races. It all came down to how they were able to adapt to the changes presented before them. They didn't need to be the smartest. They didn't need to have a high affinity to mana, nor did they need to have strong constitutions like the orcs. Though they wouldn't come close to the level of orcs, elves, and dwarves, humans were able to control mana, have strong physiques, and come up with new technology and theories that further increased their knowledge. Adaptability. Though it sounded dull, it was probably what made humans so scary. Sitting in front of a cafe, sipping on some iced latte whilst listening to my MP3, I looked outside the window. 2 days have passed since I had been assigned the mission by the academy. Surprise, surprise, Kevin completed it on the same night as he got his mission assigned. Show off. Jokes aside, past the first day, most people had already completed their missions. A couple of students got injured and some even nearly died, but due to some sheer luck, no one died. Though I could have been like them and done the task on the first day, I decided against doing so. There was a reason for my action. For one, completing the task so fast would definitely arouse suspicion from the professors, and two, I just needed some time to sort my state of mind. It's been about 2 months since I had reincarnated into my late novel, and despite having seen all sorts of terrible things, I still couldn't quite grasp the concept of death. I've sort of forced myself to not think about it. Even after I killed Elijah back in the afterparty, I wasn't affected much due to the effects of Monarch's indifference. But that was merely a way for me to cope. In order to cope, I lied to myself into making myself think that the person who killed Elijah wasn't me, but another version of me that was under the effect of monarch's indifference. I knew this wasn't good for me, but if I didn't do so, my mentality would have long crumbled. Biting the top of my latte cup, I looked at the foremost notification on my phone. Time left until mission expires, 01D, 02H, 17M, 24S. Now, I was once again presented with a scenario where I had to kill someone. My first thought when I got the mission was, let's use monarch's indifference. If I used that skill, I wouldn't have to worry about having nightmares for a week. However, after a bit of thinking, I decided against doing so. I needed to get used to death. I needed to acknowledge the fact that I was no longer on Earth, but inside of my novel where the morals were completely different from the world I used to live in. It was hard. It was very hard. Though I've tried multiple times already, the morals that had been engraved in me for 32 years of my life couldn't just be thrown away in the drain as I wished. It just wasn't possible, but that didn't mean this couldn't change in the future. Though I may not be able to get used to killing immediately, there will eventually come a time where I would finally be indifferent towards killing. Though it was going to be hard, it wasn't impossible. All I needed to do was adapt. Plap. Placing my now empty latte down, I stood up and left the cafe. Resolutely looking at the counting timer on my phone, I headed back towards the mansion so that I could get all preparations done. Today I would try to consciously kill without the aid of monarch's indifference. Though I knew this day would eventually come, it didn't stop me from feeling a hint of anxiety creep into my heart. Killing without the aid of anything. That was my resolve. 10 p.m. Outside a venue filled with people, I stood on top of the opposite building quietly scouting the perimeter of the venue. Inside of the venue I was looking at, a masquerade party was being held. People wearing masks dancing and chatting could be seen everywhere. This was quite inconvenient for me as I had a hard time finding my target because of this. The masquerade party was a celebratory party in commemoration of the building's opening. The host of the party was my current target, Carl Czar. According to the files I had been sent, my target was the head of a minor drug organization that sold and traded potent drugs into Hallberg. Despite the fact that the organization he controlled was small, he earned a hefty amount of money. Enough to afford a whole building. The building he just bought was merely a building he had bought so that he could show off his wealth to the others, and it was one of the many other properties he owned. After looking carefully, I was finally able to spot my target. Despite the fact that everyone was wearing a mask, my target was surprisingly easy to spot. Wearing a gold mask that only covered his eyes, Carl had a group of people following him. They were probably his bodyguards. Frowning slightly, I thought something was strange. He was being too obvious. Despite this being a masquerade party, he didn't try to hide who he was. If he wasn't as obvious, I would have probably had a harder time spotting him. Maybe he caught wind of what was happening these past few days. I thought as I looked at it from a different perspective. If so, it made sense. I mean, who wouldn't become more cautious after seeing a lot of big shots disappear in a matter of days? He was currently living his days not knowing whether he would be one of those people that disappeared overnight. I too would have become paranoid. Looking at Carl's figure walking around to the venue accompanied by the many bodyguards, I measured the distance between us. In terms of distance, I was probably about a couple hundred meters away. Though it wasn't far, it was also not close. I needed to kill him before he left for good. If he managed to leave before I could kill him, I may not be able to find another good time to kill him. In any case, my job today was simple. I just had to wait for my target to leave before killing him. 11 p.m. The sun had already long set and what replaced it was the gentle moonlight that lit the surrounding streets. The street lanterns brightly lit the streets of Hallberg as occasionally a few cars would drive by in the distance. The masquerade was nearing its ending stages. Luxurious cars arrived at the venue one by one, and people adorned in fancy dresses and masks filled with strange patterns exited the building and entered the cars that soon drove into the distance. As they left, the roaring sound of the car's engine could be heard not so far from where I was standing. 11:30 p.m. A black limousine arrived in front of the party venue. Soon, two people exited the building and made their way towards the limousine. Seeing the two people leave the premises, I instantly became alert and prepared for what was to come. My target Carl Czar had finally left the venue. Though I could have killed him while he was still at the venue, there was a high chance things were going to get troublesome if I were to kill him in front of everyone. In the end, I could only wait for him to exit the building and attack then. Just as I was about to make my move, I halted and looked at Carl. Taking off his mask, Carl's figure suddenly morphed to the figure of a young man in his 30s. Opening my eyes wide, abruptly turning my head left, I could see a black car speeding off in the distance. Shit, I've been had. This guy was much more cat-irons than I had anticipated. After a lot of big shots disappeared over the last 2 days, noticing that something was strange, Carl took no chances and heavily invested in security as well as methods to avoid being assassinated. The guy who was pretending to be him was most likely wearing a top skin mask that lasted for a couple of hours, meaning that after the time was up the mask would no longer function. Staring at the black car that was speeding off into the distance, a smirk appeared on my face. His plan was honestly quite good, too bad he was currently being targeted by me. Prior to coming here, I did a thorough investigation of the nearby areas. I had memorized every single street in the nearby radius. And I knew exactly which road he was going to take. Jumping off the building I was on, I softly landed on the ground and sped towards the distance. Turning left and right of a couple of buildings, I increased my pace even further. It was a race against time. Because his main house was in the opposite direction, I knew exactly which road he was going to take to get back home. Though it may look like they shook me off, I already knew that our paths were bound to cross very soon. Let's see if you can really escape from my grasp. The Author's POV. Chapter 63, Resolve, 2. Swiftly moving around the alleys of Hallberg, taking out my phone, I quickly checked the map of the surroundings. Despite not knowing the current position of the car, I could estimate how long it would take for it to reach the main road that was a few blocks away from my current position. If things were going as I predicted, in approximately 15 minutes they would reach the main road. Staring at the red dot on the map that marked my position, I lightly frowned and increased my speed. Fuck, I should definitely get a movement art after this. As I ran, I couldn't help but curse at my speed. Though my rank increased and my speed along with it, it felt as if I still lacked in the speed department. Fortunately, because I was directly cutting through the buildings to reach my destination, the distance that I covered was much less compared to the car, which needed to go through a couple of adjacent roads that connected to the main road. Huff, huff, this must be the right road. Panting heavily, after having run at full speed for 10 minutes straight, I supported myself with my knees and looked ahead. In front of me stood a deserted road that was dimly lit by the street lamps that stood on the side of the road. The sidewalks were empty, and all the houses next to the road had their lights turned off. Checking my phone and confirming that I was at the right destination, I took out my MP3 and scrolled down my playlist. I needed something to take my mind off of what was to happen next. And what better way than through music? Let's go with this. Equals 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 equals. Moonlight Sonata. Beethoven. Midnight play button 1500 hours. Plus volume. Equals 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 equals. Feeling the breeze of the night, I stood in front of the deserted road. V-room. About time. As soon as I pressed the play button of my MP3, on the opposite side of the road, a black car sped in my direction. Glancing at the oncoming car, I closed my eyes and savored the music that was playing in my ears. Foo. Beep. Beep. Ignoring the beeping coming from the incoming car, letting out a long breath, I channeled my mana at the tip of my sword and drew a circle in the air. Slowly a yellow translucent circle appeared in front of me. Following the first circle, I drew a second and a third one. Go. Stacking them up together, I pushed them towards the incoming vehicle. Vroom. Screech. Noticing the circles heading their way, the car screeched and swerved to the side as the driver tried to avoid the rings. However, it was too late. Despite the driver's attempt to dodge the circles, they still hit the car on its backside, causing it to spin a couple of times before slamming against a street light. Bomb. Not bad. Staring at my now scattering rings, I couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. Prior to coming to Hallberg, my circles could only last for 2 seconds and had no substance to them. After having come to Hallberg, I didn't stop training once. Although the amount of time I trained was cut considerably, it didn't stop me from improving my second sword art, Ring of Vindication. And thanks to that, though I didn't manage to increase the time the rings could remain in the air, I managed to add substance to them. Meaning that right now, hitting a ring was the same as hitting real matter. And because I managed to hit the car on its backside, I disrupted its momentum, causing it to spin and crash against the pole. This technique was essentially a similar tactic to the pit maneuver that police used, but without the need for me to use another car. Plaque. Ah, shit. Opening the door of the car, a rather handsome individual with short brown hair and green eyes came out. Looking around and noticing me standing in the middle of the road, the handsome individual's eyes narrowed. So you must be one of those rats sent from the lock. Behind him, 4 more individuals exited the vehicle. They all wore nice black suits, and apart from a few shards of glass on their clothes, they seemed to be relatively unharmed. Glancing behind him, the young individual felt a surge of confidence rise from within him as he started speaking with more confidence. I've long known that I was a possible target. I hoped that it wouldn't have come to this, but it seems that in the end, you pests from the lock are planning of cleansing the whole of Hallberg. Nudging at the guards behind him to come forward, the handsome individual smiled and said, I'll give you a chance, leave now before things get serious. Removing one of my earpieces, I shook my head and looked at the handsome individual who hid behind his 4 bodyguards. I'm afraid I'd have to disappoint you there, Mr. Czar. You see, if I don't kill you, there's a high chance I might fail my year. It was true. Because my theoretical grades were absolute garbage, if I didn't complete this mission, there was a high chance I would fail this course. Simply put, I had no other option but to complete this mission. Frowning, Karl Czar's face crumpled as he darkly said, I gave you a chance but you blew it. Signaling with his fingers to 3 of the 4 guards before him, instantly 3 G-ranked auras erupted, enveloping the street and me. Since you leave me no choice, I guess you must die. Feeling the 3 auras directed in my direction, I remained indifferent. Putting my earpiece back into my ear, I channeled the mana inside of my body and accustomed myself to the pressure coming from the 3 guards. Ignoring the 3 G-ranked individuals, my eyes never once drifted away from the 4th member that kept standing next to Karl. Similar to the other 3 guards, he was wearing a black suit. He had long black hair that fell right onto his shoulders, and his angular face looked extremely vicious. Though he was hiding it, he was F-ranked. His entire presence was drastically different compared to the other 3. It felt as if a vicious python was staring at me, ready to strangle me at any moment. He was on another level. Noticing my indifferent expression, Karl frowned and looked at the guard that was standing next to him. Glancing at Karl, the guard nodded his head and stepped forward. Vroom. Instantly, a pressure that was on a different level compared to the 3 guards engulfed the entire street. Taking out a dagger from his pocket, the guard smiled as he slowly licked the blade of the dagger. It's been a while since I've had some fun. Seeing his strongest guard move, Karl felt a wave of confidence wash over him as he commanded the other guards. Kill him. Hearing Karl's command, the 3 G-ranked guards instantly moved and ran in my direction. Staring at the guards coming in my direction, my eyes slightly darted towards the F-ranked guard who was behind them. Though it looked like he was not going to attack, I knew that he was most probably going to attack me when I least expect it. He was probably going to attack as soon as he saw an opening. Therefore, Foo. Releasing a long breath, my F-ranked aura instantly enveloped the entire street as white light started emanating from my body. Tapping on my sword, a bright white light instantly engulfed the whole street. The second movement of the Keiki-style, horizon-splitting slash. Click. Thud. 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 As soon as the light died down, 3 heads could be seen rolling on the floor. Biting my lips and not looking back, I stared at Karl and the other guard. I just consciously killed 3 people. Despite trying my best to not show it, my mind was currently in a state of turmoil. Guilt, shame, anger, resentment, many emotions constantly came and went inside of my mind as I desperately struggled to keep my mind intact. I couldn't crumble yet. At least not until I finished my mission. WWJ just happened. Staggering a few steps backward, Karl almost fell over as he looked at the heads of the 3 guards on the floor. Staring at his remaining guard, Karl weakly said, Edmund, you can kill him rig HT. Hearing Karl's voice and recovering from his surprise, the F-ranked guard, Edmund, licked his lips and nodded. This might be more entertaining than I thought. Dashing in my direction, Edmund stabbed his dagger in the direction of my throat. Looking at Edmund coming my way, I instantly dashed a few steps back and drew a circle in the air with my sword. Like a snake, the dagger coursed through the air at incredible speeds as it made its way towards my direction. Clank. Hacking at the circle, it soon broke into millions of pieces, and the dagger soon appeared before my eyes. Looking at the dagger that was only a few inches away from my face remained indifferent. Though the circle didn't manage to block the attack, it didn't matter because all I wanted was to buy myself enough time to regain my stance. Click. Clank. Quickly repelling the dagger with my sword, I shoulder-tackled Edmund and took a few steps back. KHHH. Pushed back, Edmund smiled savagely as he said, "Not bad." Flicking the dagger in the air, Edmund switched it to his left hand and once again dashed in my direction. Noticing him heading my way, I quickly drew 3 circles in the air. Stacking them together, I pushed them in the direction of where the dagger was coming from. I needed to buy myself more time. I needed 5 seconds. 5 seconds to be able to accumulate enough wind scions to coat my sword and use the first movement of the Keiki style, Quick Flash. Only through that move could I kill him. 1. Futile trick. Seeing the 3 circles heading in his direction, a green glow covered Edmund's body as he flicked his dagger in the air and grabbed it with both his hands before stabbing at the circles. Crash. 2. As if the 3 circles were made of paper, they instantly broke into a million particles. Shit. Staring at the dagger headed in my direction, I bit my lips until blood fell on my chin and only moved slightly to the side. 3. Spurt. KHHH, ah. Piercing my shoulder until the tip of the dagger could be seen appearing on the other side of my back, I stared at Edmund, who looked at me with an expression of shock. 4. You crazy bastard. Smiling slightly, I said. Yeah, I think so too. 5. The first movement of the Keiki style, Quick Flash. Thud. KHHH. Huff, huff. Grabbing my shoulder, which was bleeding heavily, I panted heavily as my vision blurred slightly. Hee, don't come near me. Forcefully trying to regain my composure, I quickly headed towards my target, Karl Czar. Why, oh, you want money? Women. Fame. I can give you anything, please don't kill me. I don't want to die. Picking up one of the earpieces that fell off of one of my ears, I put it back on and ignored Karl's pleas. Arriving before Karl, I let out a long breath and raised my sword. Looking at his sorry state, I started hesitating a bit, but after thinking about all the horrible things he did from reading his report, I firmed my will and slashed down. Spurt. Thud. Wiping Karl's blood off of my face, I let out a long breath and stared at the moon that was surrounded by the stars. I guess I truly am a part of this world now. The author's POV. Chapter 64, What Will Happen Will Happen, 1. Is that him? Did he really get injured over such a simple mission? He really does look weak. Aimlessly walking around the mansion, I ignored the whispers and stares coming from some of the students that I passed along the way. Yesterday night, after completing the mission, I returned to the mansion all battered up. My whole arm was bleeding profusely and my clothes were all torn. Though I didn't pass out, to the people who saw me return, it looked as if I had been through hell. Because I had some notoriety, news of my battered state spread across all of the students, and soon I became the hot topic of the first years. Because the missions that we got were not a secret from the other students, after a bit of digging, people immediately found out who my target was, and news of me getting beat up by a less than G-ranked individual spread across the academy. In the end, this resulted in me becoming the butt of the jokes of the first years. Weakling. Loser. Trash. Walking along the corridor, I was called all sorts of defamatory names by everyone that saw me. On a normal day, I would have grumbled and cursed at the people talking crap about me, but today, staring at my hands, I recalled the moment when my sword reaped through the lives of multiple people at once. I killed. I didn't sleep throughout the whole night. Right now, to the people around me, I probably looked like a lifeless corpse that was aimlessly wandering around the mansion. My mind kept replaying the moments where I reaped through the lives of the 4 bodyguards. I could vividly recall Karl's pleading face as he begged for me to spare him. Phoo. Letting out a long breath and staring at the ceiling of the corridor, I tried to calm my mind. What had happened already happened. There was no going back. I had killed and I needed to move on. This wasn't going to be the only time, and it sure as heck wasn't going to be the last time. This was the path that I had chosen for myself and thus had to take responsibility for my decisions. Moreover, there was something more important I needed to worry about. The massacre of Hallberg. The second big event in the first arc of the novel. Tomorrow at 9:45 p.m., the last day of the trip, when everyone was sleeping, an organized attack will happen. Though their primary targets were Kevin and the other weaker students weren't spared from their pursuit. Meaning that I was also not safe. Though I decided not to interfere, I needed to prepare myself for what was to come. Placing my hand on my chin, I fell into deep thought. First things first, I needed to memorize the whole building blueprint. I needed to find a good spot where I could get a good view of what was happening as well as attract the least amount of attention. The reason why I needed a good view of what was happening was so that I could overlook anything that deviated from the plotline. I didn't want another incident like the one with Amanda to happen. Fortunately, I had the mysterious book with me. With it, I could more or less tell if something outside of the norm was going to happen. If anything that deviated from the plotline happened, it was my job to prevent it at any cost. Secondly, I needed to quickly recover from the wounds that I had sustained yesterday. Despite the fact that I had healing potions, they couldn't heal all my injuries that quickly. Especially since my whole shoulder had been pierced and my shoulder muscles had been torn. I still needed a full day to completely heal my shoulder. Right now, the whole of my right hand hurt like hell. Just the slightest movement and I would get an electrifying pain coursing through my body. Though I could tough it out, I'd still prefer if I was in top condition for tomorrow. Lastly, I needed to sort out my mentality. As of right now, I wasn't in the right state of mind to be put through another scenario that required me to reap through lives. I just couldn't. Just the thought of me killing again was causing my hands to tremble uncontrollably. I was not ready mentally to go through such an experience again. In the end, I had already decided that for tomorrow I would use Monarch's Indifference throughout the whole event. Only after killing for the first time yesterday did I realize how many flaws I had, both combat and mentality-wise. I was too emotional. Despite me trying my best to get over the fact that I had killed someone, the thought of what future lay ahead of me and how many more lives I would take made me question my humanity. Was I right? Was everything that I was doing really okay? Was killing the correct answer? Conflicting thoughts continuously brewed inside of my mind as I tried to find the correct answer. In the end, I still had a long way to go before being able to confidently stand up against demons and villains. Sighing and ridding of all my distracting thoughts, I quickly headed to my room and started preparing for tomorrow. These are probably going to be the longest 2 days of my life. Bang. 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 Huff, huff, huff. Standing shirtless inside of an empty room filled with training dummies, an extremely handsome individual stood in the middle of the room heavily panting for air. His perfectly honed body was drenched in sweat, and his eyes were bloodshot. Gulp. Downing a potion and recovering some of his stamina, the young individual quickly dashed before one of the training dummies and punched it with all his might. Die. 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 Bang. 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 Cursing and continuously punching the dummy until he ran out of air, small shockwaves spread throughout the room as the sound of the collision between his fists and the dummies reverberated around the place. Exactly 30 minutes after continuously hitting the dummies, the young individual laid on the floor heavily gasping for air. Staring at the ceiling, he clenched his jaw hard and he covered his eyes with his arm. Just what am I lacking? Recalling Kevin's achievements on the first night the mission was assigned, Gene couldn't help but feel a massive wall standing before him. It felt as if a wall that he couldn't climb was standing before him. No matter how much work he put in, he couldn't find any way to bridge the gap between himself and Kevin. Was Kevin that much more talented than him? Should he just accept the fact that Kevin was better than him? Damn it. Bang. Clenching his fist hard, Gene punched the floor hard. I can't accept this. Even if my talent is not as good as his, I have access to the best resources and facilities. This should be enough for me to be able to become better than him. Kevin, who was an orphan and had nothing, managed to surpass him, who was born with a golden spoon. He couldn't accept it. There was no way he could accept it. Gulp. Recovering some of his energy, Gene immediately downed another potion and stood up. I will surpass you no matter what. Bang. Dashing towards one of the training dummies, he once again started training until he couldn't stand anymore. This process repeated continuously until his fists were both bloodied and bruised. In the end, only after passing out from overworking himself did he stop training. Inside a small cozy cafe, decorated with beautiful plants and old wooden tables and boards, two stunningly beautiful young girls sat facing each other. Sipping on some hot mocha, one of the two stunning girls that had short creamy brown hair looked at the girl in front of her and said, "Say, Amanda, did you notice something strange happening these past few days?" Glancing at Emma, Amanda frowned for a second before shaking her head. "No. Really?" Frowning for a bit, Emma's brow relaxed. "Maybe it's just me." For the past few days, Emma had this sense of discomfort. She constantly felt as if someone was keeping an eye on her. It was sort of unsettling, but in the end, she could only think of it as her being paranoid. With all the things that were happening with the Parker family, she couldn't help but become more sensitive to her surroundings. Since she couldn't prove her deductions, she could only pray that it was just her misconception. Shaking her head and switching topics, Emma looked at Amanda and said, "By the way, did you hear about the latest rumor?" Tilting her head to the side, Amanda shook her head. Yeah, you're not the type to care about that sort of stuff." Realizing that Amanda didn't care about gossip or any of that stuff, Emma leaned back on her chair and softly mumbled, "Well, it's not like it's anything particularly exciting, just about the weird guy that sits on the left side of the class." Hearing the word weird and left side of the class, Amanda's eyebrow jumped slightly as she said, Who? Taken aback by Amanda's sudden interest, Emma looked at her strangely. "I'm not sure about his name, but he's the weird guy that sits on the left side of the class and always sheaths and unsheaths his sword in the middle of the training ground." Frowning her brows, Amanda said, "What about him?" Noticing something odd about Amanda's behavior, Emma squinted her eyes and said, "Why are you suddenly so interested? You usually don't care about this stuff." Realizing that she was being a bit too pushy, Amanda brushed it off and said, It's nothing much. He was in my elective food exploration, so I was just curious." Not believing her, Emma's eyes narrowed as she scrutinized Amanda. In the end, after seeing Amanda's indifferent face, she gave up and said, "It's nothing interesting, it's just that he is now nicknamed the weakest first year, and other stupid nicknames like that." Taken aback, Amanda couldn't help but raise her eyebrow as she repeated, "The weakest first year?" Nodding her head and seeing Amanda's confusion, Emma followed up, "Apparently this stemmed from the fact that some students saw him return all battered up last night, and after checking what mission he had, they found out that he only had to deal with a less than G ranked nobody." Listening to Emma's talk, Amanda couldn't help but slightly frown. Just what was he thinking? The more she knew about him, the more mysterious he became. Coming back battered after going against a single G-ranked individual. Like hell, she would believe that. There was no way the same guy that killed Elijah, a less than D-ranked villain, could possibly get hurt from a less than G-ranked individual. He must have either faked his injury or something else must have happened. Hey, Amanda." Snapping Amanda out of her thoughts was Emma, who pouted at her. "You were the one who asked me to tell you about the rumors revolving around that student, and yet you're not even paying attention." Sorry." Shaking her head, Emma sighed and looked at her watch. "Well, whatever, it's about time we go back anyways." Standing up and putting on her jacket, she looked at Amanda and said, "Let's go." Nodding her head, Amanda stood up and left with Emma. Along the way, Amanda couldn't help but once again think of Ren, who had saved her during the after-party. Just what was his true goal? The author's POV. Chapter 65, What Will Happen, 2. Looking at the blueprints of the building through the holographic function of my tablet, I fell into deep thought. It was already the next day, and today was the day that the Massacre of Hallberg event would start. After running around the mansion all night yesterday, I finally managed to secure myself the blueprints of the building, and looking at them now, I couldn't help but think one thing. Big. The mansion was big. And when I mean big, I mean very big. If we exclude all of the outside facilities, the mansion was about the size of a football stadium. It had 5 levels, with the bottom level being a parking lot filled with multiple cars and the ground level being the place where the reception and dining hall were located. The first and second floors were where the guest rooms were located, with the professors staying on the second floor and the students on the first floor. The last floor had an outdoor swimming pool with training facilities that the students could use at any time of the day. Though they weren't as advanced as the ones in the lock, they were still equipped with state-of-the-art equipment such as gravity rooms and training dummies. Supporting my body with my arms on the table, I took a careful look at the blueprints of the building. I needed to carefully analyze all of the exits and entrance points of the building. Where the closest and furthest exits from my location were located, as well as which areas were the most secure. Pinching the hologram to zoom, I carefully looked at the layout of floors 1 to 3. The goal of the assassins was to infiltrate the top 3 floors as well as the bottom floor. If I don't remember wrongly, at around 8 p.m. the assassins will infiltrate the mansion when the trip and dinner banquet was being held. Their plan was to attack each student as soon as they returned back from the dinner banquet. Meaning that by the time the banquet ended, the assassins' preparations were done. The stronger assassins will attack the professors so that they could hold them back and prevent them from helping the students. According to what I wrote in the novel, reinforcement will come exactly 1 hour after the attack, and it will be Donna who, with her strength alongside another professor, managed to single-handedly kill most of the assassins on the second floor. So for 1 hour, the students' goal was to survive. After 1 hour, most of the assassins would have been mostly killed by Donna, who will then help Kevin and the rest. Though I said the goal was to survive for 1 hour, it was easier said than done. The assassins that attacked the students were ranked from G to D and were highly skilled and experienced. This meant that even if the students fought against an assassin of the equivalent rank, there was a high chance they would still lose due to their lack of experience. Fortunately for me, because no one knew about my strength, I could more or less quickly get rid of the people that were after me and surveil the situation carefully. Now the real question was, how do I proceed from then? Do I silently get rid of some of the assassins, or do I hide? I guess the first option wouldn't really be plausible, since I need to take into consideration what my meddling would do. There was a chance I could screw up the plotline if I killed some of the assassins who were supposed to carry out an important role in this scenario. In the end, after thinking for a bit, I decided that the best option for me right now was to stay put, and only interfere was when I needed to defend myself. Excessive meddling on my part could cause future anomalies in the plotline, which could create unwanted scenarios like back in the afterparty. Alright, I guess that's that. Checking my watch and seeing that it was already 6:30 p.m. I closed my tablet and headed for the shower. In 30 minutes' time, I needed to get dressed and head towards where the end-of-trip dinner was being held. Sighing, I could already imagine myself going through an hour of long, boring speeches that seemed to go on forever. The funny thing was that during those boring speeches, assassins were infiltrating the building. Even if I wanted to warn them about the impending danger, chances were that they would scoff and laugh at me. I'd love nothing more but ignore all those long and boring speeches, but it's not like I could just say, "We are currently being surrounded by multiple assassins and a lot of us are going to die, so hurry up and finish your speeches and get ready to defend yourselves." Moreover, with my current reputation, there was a high chance no one would listen to me. In fact, I'd probably get ridiculed. Bastards. In the end, after taking a quick shower and changing into a set of new clothes, I headed towards the dining hall with heavy thoughts. Dining hall, 8:15 p.m. After infiltrating the facility and taking out the person responsible for communications, It's been about an hour since I entered the dining hall, and the world around me had turned black and white. I was having trouble keeping my mind focused. 1 hour. I went through 1 hour of roundabout speeches from different professors and representatives going on about how proud they were proud of us and what they learned throughout the trip. From how monsters were processed and from what they learned during their mission. I want to die. Who thought that giving such long speeches was a good idea? Quite honestly, I'd rather be attacked by multiple assassins at once rather than listening to any more of this gibberish. Sighing and looking left and right, I could see some students in similar situations, as they too seemed to be on the verge of passing out from boredom. After this long trip, I have seen the growth of a lot of you, and I can say with confidence that you are slowly shaping yourselves into becoming strong and capable heroes that will soon shoulder the heavy burden of protecting humanity from the demons. Raising his glass of wine, the current professor that was speaking looked at everyone and said, "It is with great pride and honor that I would like to end my speech saluting the future heroes of our world." Clap. 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 After finishing his speech, a wave of applause engulfed the entire dining hall, drowning all other sounds. I too clapped. But for an entirely different reason. "Alright guys, calm down, calm down." Standing up, the professor of Class A-17 gestured for everyone to calm down. Connor Norvac. That was the name of the professor in charge of Class A-17, and despite not being a ranked hero, he was still a formidable S-ranked hero that even contributed in the defeat of a Marquis-ranked demon. And from the way he carried himself, I could see how he defeated a Marquis-ranked demon. He along with Donna slaughtered most of the assassins that stopped them from helping the students and would be instrumental in the future for a couple of events that involved Kevin. Looking at him, his presence completely engulfed the entire hall, making most of the students stop whatever they were doing. I too felt overwhelmed. It felt as if a massive bear was looking down on me ready to rip my head off at any moment. His appearance reminded me of a Viking which I used to see in movies. He was about 2 meters tall and had massive broad shoulders. Below his nose was a long blonde beard that stopped halfway through his neck, and his sea blue eyes and long blonde hair that cascaded all the way to his back made him look quite handsome. His muscles, which were 3 times the size of mine, were extremely impressive, and his white t-shirt, which was too tight for his body, perfectly emphasized his bulky outline. Standing up and looking at everyone in the room and making sure that everyone was quiet, Connor's deep voice resounded across the hall. I know that most of you are bored senseless from all those boring speeches. If I had to be honest, I too am on the verge of dying due to how boring they were. Stopping halfway, Connor paused and smiled as a wave of chuckles could be heard from multiple students and professors. I will keep it short and make a short announcement. After waiting for the hall to become silent, Connor continued. Your assignment work can be handed in right after you return from the trip, and that today, apart from relaxing and enjoying yourself, you don't have to do anything else. I don't want to go into too much detail regarding what you need to do, as you can just ask your professor regarding the details of the work. All I want you guys to know is that the deadline for your assignments is 2 days after the trip, and your group will be graded based on what you present. Looking around and seeing that everyone understood what he said, Connor smiled and said, So in conclusion, please enjoy yourselves for the rest of the day. You deserve it. Clap. 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 Finished speaking, Connor sat down and took a big gulp of his drink amidst the wave of applause coming from the students and professors. Soon after, all of the students dispersed and went to the buffet area, filling their plates with all sorts of delicious food. All right. Looking at the students heading towards the food area, I checked my watch and let out a long breath. It was currently 8:30 p.m. and in a little bit more than an hour, the event was going to start. If I said I wasn't nervous, that would be a lie. It felt as if a million butterflies were fluttering inside of my stomach, making me lose my appetite. Looking around and seeing all the students and professors joyfully laughing and chatting with each other, a small part of me felt guilty. A lot of them will die. And despite me knowing that, I didn't do anything to stop it. I guess this was the price I had to pay as the author of this novel. Gulp. Taking a cup of wine from one of the waiters, I gulped it all in one go. Ha. Staring at the empty glass in my hands, I thought. I really need some proper alcohol. 9:30 p.m. 15 minutes to go. The way back to my room seemed to be much longer than ever before. Each step I took seemed heavier than the other, almost as if lead was stuck on them. Looking behind me, at the students who were returning at the same time as me, I bit my lip and continued making my way towards my room. It was finally time, huh? The moment I dreaded since coming on this trip. The massacre of Hallberg. An event that resulted in a quarter of the first years to die, and one of the biggest events that contributed to the growth of the main protagonists. An event that will shock the whole human domain, and result in the lock becoming heavily scrutinized by the media. In the end, what will happen will happen. Arriving in front of my room and placing my hand on the doorknob, I let out a long breath. Phoo. This was it, I thought. Once I opened this door, the event was going to start. A couple of assassins would ambush me as soon as I opened the door, and from there the rest of the students would too be faced with a similar situation. Closing my eyes and activating Monarch's indifference, I slowly opened the door. Click. The Author's POV. Chapter 66, The Massacre of Hallberg, 1. Click. Closing the door behind him, Ren stood in front of the door. The room was dark, and apart from his breathing, no other sound could be heard. Standing in front of the door, Ren looked at the narrow corridor that led to the living room of the small apartment. Click. Turning on the lights whilst keeping an eye on the living room, Ren slowly took off his shoes. Though he couldn't see the whole living room due to the corridor narrowing his line of sight, Ren knew that hiding inside of the living room were assassins waiting for him to enter. Looking left and right, Ren summoned his sword and channeled his mana towards the tip of his sword. Oof, I am so stuffed. I can barely move, guess I'll quickly head to bed. Making small talk at the entrance of the room, a translucent ring slowly formed in front of him. Vroom. As soon as the ring fully formed, Ren pushed it forwards. Slowly, the ring moved towards the living room. Shwa. Schwa. As soon as the ring crossed the corridor and entered the living room, two black-clad silhouettes appeared out of nowhere and attacked the ring. Crack! Breaking into a million particles, the ring scattered in the air. Staring at the particles scattering in the air for a split second and noticing something wrong, the two silhouettes immediately turned towards the entrance of the room. Tap, tap, tap. Appearing from the other side of the living room, Ren's indifferent figure walked out. Expressionlessly looking at the two black-clad individuals, Ren took a stance as a white glow emanated from his body. Nodding towards the two silhouettes, Ren placed his hand on the grip of his sword. Click. The second movement of the keiki-style, horizon-splitting slash. Voom. As if a bolt of lightning had descended, a bright light illuminated the room and a horizontal white streak of light appeared on the necks of the two silhouettes. Before the silhouettes could make out what was happening, they felt their world turn upside down as they slowly saw their headless bodies standing upright before them. Thud. Thud. Click. Removing his hand from the sword, Ren apathetically walked towards his room, ignoring the two heads rolling on the floor. Along the way, his shoulder twitched a couple of times, but he ignored it. Though his injury still wasn't fully healed, with the effects of Monarch's indifference, he could ignore the pain that was coursing through his shoulder. Heading towards the nightstand next to the bed, Ren opened the drawer and took out a red leather book. Deactivating Monarch's indifference to save mana, Ren felt his emotions return to him. KHHHH. As his emotions returned, Ren's face repeatedly changed as he felt his shoulder twitch uncontrollably. Taking a minute to suppress the pain, Ren opened the red book and read through its contents. Clank. 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 Surrounded by three black-clothed individuals, Kevin swiftly moved around his apartment hacking at them with his sword whenever he saw an opening. Clank. KHHH. Parrying Kevin's sword, one of the black-clad individuals signaled to the other two people to attack at the same time. Noticing their sign, Kevin forcefully twisted his body and defended against two attacks coming from his left and right side. Clank. Clank. KHHH. Barely blocking the attacks, Kevin took a few steps back as beads of sweat dripped from his forehead. Looking at the three black-clad individuals before him, Kevin couldn't help but curse. Damn it. Whoever the trio was, they knew about his attack pattern and the sword art he used. From the way he attacked and his habits, they knew them all. It seemed that whoever they were, they had done their research on him and had come prepared. Frowning, Kevin continued to pressure the trio, but it was to no avail as whenever he attacked, his feints would easily get read by them, blocking whatever he threw at them. Moreover, what made things worse for Kevin was that whenever they counterattacked, they managed to precisely and cleanly direct their attacks where he was most vulnerable, almost as if they knew where he was going to attack. The more Kevin fought, the more he realized how adept to his fighting style they were. It was almost as if they had been trained precisely to counter him. It was to the point that they were coordinating perfectly with each other, defending exactly where his true sword intent showed up and attacking exactly when he was most vulnerable. Taking few steps back and looking at the trio, Kevin let out a long breath. Though he was in a bind, he remained calm. Normally, considering how difficult the situation was, Kevin would have already used overdrive by now. However, that was only if it was about a week ago. Now things were different. Voom. Releasing his D-ranked pressure, Kevin's attacks became sharper and stronger whilst the trio's attacks started to become more sluggish and predictable. Dodging one of the attacks coming from the right, Kevin jumped in the air and stepped on the sword that came towards his left side, propelling his body in the air. Twisting his body in the air, Kevin channeled wind scions at the bottom of his feet and stepped on the air. Redirecting his body to the other side of one of the black-clad individuals, Kevin hacked his sword towards his head. Caught off guard, the black-clad individual tried to defend himself, but it was to no avail as Kevin's figure disappeared and reappeared right behind him, piercing him straight into the heart. Spurt. 1. Removing the sword from the black-clad individual's back, Kevin stared at the other remaining two individuals in the room. Tensing his calves, Kevin's body shot in their direction. Stabbing towards the black-clad individual on the left, a red glow slowly started emanating from Kevin's body. Seeing Kevin's sword coming in their direction, the black-clad individual on the left took a defensive stance whilst the other black-clad individual hacked in Kevin's direction. Just as the black-clad individual on the left was about to block Kevin's attack, Kevin forcefully twisted his foot and redirected his attack towards the guy on the right, catching them both off guard. Cry-eye. Grazing the black-clad individual on the right sword, Kevin tossed his sword to his other hand and stabbed it towards the guy on the left whilst simultaneously using his fist to punch the guy on the right in the stomach. Bomb. Curling his body due to the heavy punch from Kevin, the black-clad individual on the right dropped his sword and held his stomach in pain. Redirecting his attention towards the remaining black-clad individual, Kevin stabbed his sword in his direction. Clank. Parrying Kevin's sword, Kevin thrust his sword again towards his head. Expecting the sword to be redirected to his heart, the black-clad individual did not notice the slight glint in Kevin's eyes as his sword continued making its way towards his head, piercing him straight through his brain. Spurt. 2. Clank. Turning around, Kevin easily parried the attack coming from the other guy and kicked him in the stomach. Stepping back to avoid Kevin's foot, Kevin reappeared on the remaining black-clad individual's left flank and pierced him in the liver. Spurt. 3. Thud. Removing his sword from the body of the last black-clad individual, Kevin frowned and immediately headed towards the exit of his room. Though he wanted to check the bodies of the people that assaulted him, he could hear a commotion outside of his apartment. Despite being unsure of what was happening, he knew that something serious was currently happening outside of his room. Click. What's going on? Opening the door and exiting his room, Kevin couldn't believe the sight that laid ahead of him. Blood-curdling screams resounded across the whole first floor as the corpses of students and black-clad individuals could be seen sprawled everywhere. Clank. 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 The sound of metal clashing reverberated throughout the corridors of the first floor as students could be seen fighting for their lives everywhere. Multiple black-clad individuals appeared everywhere, attacking students from all sides as absolute mayhem shrouded the whole first floor. Kevin. Snapping Kevin out of his daze was Emma's distraught voice as she fought against multiple black-clad individuals with her short swords. Her perfect figure danced around them as her swords constantly clashed against their attacks. However, despite managing to hold her own against the black-clad individuals, Emma was on the verge of losing due to their numerical advantage. This was shown by how her movements were becoming more sluggish by the second. Spurt. Quickly dashing in Emma's direction, Kevin hacked towards the nearest black-clad individual, killing him instantly as his sword disappeared and reappeared on his neck. Spurt. 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 Like a Shura from hell, Kevin hacked and stabbed everyone in his way. Along the way, he would help a couple of students who were on the verge of getting killed by the black-clad individuals. Spurt. Huff, huff, you okay? After killing multiple black-clad individuals, Kevin appeared before Emma as he heavily panted for air. Huff, yes, thanks. Similarly gasping for breath and nodding her head, Emma's eyes darted all over the place as she looked at all of the battles happening around her. What's going on? Where are the professors? I don't know. Shaking his head, Kevin looked just as confused as Emma. Logically speaking, with everything that was happening around them, the professors would have already have come down to help them as they wouldn't stand there and just watch their students die. It had to be noted that a lot of the students here were sons and daughters of very influential figures. Their deaths would put a heavy burden on the lock, therefore, there was no way they wouldn't be here right now defending them. Yet with everything going on around them, they still weren't here. That only meant one thing. Thinking that far, Kevin clenched his fists and looked at Emma, who seemed to have had the same thought as him. They were on their own. Whoosh. 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 Snapping Emma and Kevin out of their thoughts, 3 streaks of lights appeared before them as 3 black-clad individuals not so far from where they were standing fell on the ground. Quickly turning her head and looking in the direction of where the arrows came from, Emma exclaimed, "Amanda." Just as Emma was about to head in Amanda's direction, the sound of the air being sliced increased in frequency as more arrows continuously shot out from Amanda's direction. Whoosh. 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 As the arrows repeatedly shot from Amanda's quiver, they reminded Kevin and Emma of a swarm of locusts that devastated ecosystems. Spurt. 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 With each arrow that left Amanda's bow, a black-clad individual fell on the ground. Some of the black-clad individuals managed to parry Amanda's arrows whilst others couldn't. In the end, as soon as Amanda ran out of arrows, the hall was quiet as most of the black-clad individuals were either dead or seriously injured. Running towards Amanda, Emma said, "Hey Amanda, have you seen Jean and Melissa?" Putting her bow down, Amanda walked in Emma's direction and nodded. "I met Melissa on the other side of the first floor, she's currently with Han Yufei." "Then what about Jean?" A new quiver filled with arrows appeared on Amanda's hand as she shook her head. I saw Troy and Arnold together, but Jean wasn't with them, so I don't know. Frowning, Kevin thought for a moment before saying, considering how the assassins targeting me knew how I fought, there's a chance he's still fighting against them. Remembering how difficult his fight with the black-clad individuals was, Kevin looked towards Emma and Amanda and said, "Let's go help him." "Yes." Nodding her head, Emma looked in Amanda's direction and said, "You coming?" "Yes." Nodding her head, Amanda followed Kevin and Emma towards Jin's room, which was only a few blocks away from where they were. Along the way, as they traveled through the first floor, Kevin alongside Emma swept through all of the black-clad individuals they met on their way. From behind them, Amanda continuously shot arrows to support them whenever the chance called for it. With her help, Emma and Kevin didn't need to worry about watching out for sneak attacks, making their lives much easier. After a couple of minutes, Kevin and the rest managed to arrive in front of a door with the number 575 engraved on the side. "Is this the place?" Nodding her head and looking at the number of the room, Emma confirmed. "Yes, that's his room number." Click. Opening the door, Kevin entered the room and looked for Jean. However, as soon as he entered the room, all he smelt was the heavy scent of iron. Frowning, Kevin walked inside of the room and entered the living room. And there he saw it. In the middle of the room was Jin's lifeless body laying down on the floor next to 4 black hooded individuals whose limbs were all torn into a million pieces. Opening his eyes wide in disbelief, Kevin stopped dead in his track. "Hey, why did you st?" Appearing behind Kevin, Emma entered the living room, and just when she was about to speak, she stopped halfway through her sentence and gasped in shock. Following Emma, Amanda entered the room, and similarly to Emma, she gasped in shock. "Jean." Snapping out of his stupor, running towards Jean, Kevin placed his finger on his neck and checked his pulse. "There's no way Jin's dead. There's just no way." Looking at Kevin hastily checking Jin's pulse, Emma couldn't help but repeat her words as she stood rooted on her spot in disbelief. After a couple of seconds, Kevin looked towards Emma and Amanda. He tried to say something, but no words came out of his mouth. It felt as if a massive lump was stuck in his throat, preventing any sound from coming out of his mouth. His mouth opened and closed multiple times, like a fish gasping for air. In the end, after a couple of seconds of trying, no word came out from his mouth. However, despite Kevin's inability to speak, everyone in the room understood what he was trying to convey. Jean was dead. The author's POV. Chapter 67, The Massacre of Hallberg, 2. Bang. What? Breaking the nightstand with my fist, I hastily looked through the contents of the book. Flipping through the pages of the book, I quickly looked for anything that could give me a clue about what had happened to Jean, but it was to no avail as the book stopped right after Jin's death. What was happening? Jean, one of the main protagonists, died. Impossible. Hastily taking out a pen, I tried everything I could to change the outcome of what was written in the book, but it was all futile as every 5 seconds the changes I made disappeared. Damn it. Clenching my jaw and fists hard, I closed the book and let out a long breath. I needed to stay calm. I couldn't panic. Jin's death would be devastating to the plotline. He was instrumental in helping Kevin grow both as a person and as a hero. His death would have a huge effect on the plotline. I couldn't let him die. Closing my eyes, I made my mind up and headed towards the exit of my room. Whatever caused Jin's death, I had to stop it at all costs. If I allowed Jean to die, what was the point of letting all of this massacre happen? Didn't I turn a blind eye to this so that the plotline could continue? What was the point of me not interfering if things didn't go as the plotline dictated? Gulp. Gulp. Downing a couple of potions to recover my stamina and mana, I put the book in the insides of my blazer and left the room. I didn't have much time. Considering the effects of the book, I had less than 10 minutes to alter the future in which Jean was destined to die. Realistically, I had 5 minutes, since 10 minutes was the time that Kevin and the others found Jin's dead body. Reactivating Monarch's Indifference, I opened the door and made my way towards Jin's room. I had one goal, and one goal only. Preventing Jin's death. Surrounded by multiple black-clad individuals, Jin's figure deftly and skillfully moved around them. It was almost as if he was a ghost. His figure would melt with the shadows and reappear behind any one of the black-clad individuals, catching them by surprise. Swish. Appearing behind one of the black-clad individuals, Jin swung his dagger towards the back of his head. As he swung, the image of the dagger blurred as it coursed through the air in a lightning-fast manner. It was so fast that the afterimage of the dagger lingered in the air for a split second. Clank. Clank. KKHHH, damn it. As if predicting Jin's attack, quickly turning around and parrying Jin's surprise attack, two black-clad individuals appeared next to Jin and attacked him from both his right and left flank. Ducking down and dodging the two attacks, Jin dashed forward and slid between the two black-clad individuals. Slash. Slit. As he slid, two deep cuts appeared on the two black-clad individuals' calves as Jin made sure to cut their legs in order to hinder their movements. Stumbling a couple of steps due to the cuts on their legs, the other black-clad individual, who Jin tried to ambush, stabbed his sword downwards. Roll. Rolling to the side to avoid the sword, Jin tensed his core and with the aid of his back jumped up in the air. Clank. Clank. Whilst in the air, Jin forcefully twisted his body and spun like a wheel as he parried all the attacks that came from all sides. Thud. Huff, huff, huff. Landing on the ground, Jin heavily panted for air as he wiped the sweat that had started accumulating on his forehead. Looking at the 5 individuals before him, Jin's face became grim. Despite being stronger than them, it somehow felt as if he was fighting against an insatiable beast. No matter how much Jin tried, the black-clad individuals he was fighting would quickly respond to his attacks and counter them with an even more fearsome combo. It was to the point that his breathing started to become heavier and heavier by the second. From the way he saw things, the most he could last would be 5 more minutes. Any longer than that and he would be too exhausted to move. Gulp. Frowning, Jin took out a couple of potions from his storage dimension and quickly downed them. Though he could replenish his stamina and mana with potions, because he didn't expect such a situation to arise, he only had a couple of stamina and mana recovering potions with him. Therefore, despite the fact that he had potions, they could at most only help him fight for a bit longer. They really weren't a solution for his current predicament. Clank. Clank. Parrying the attacks coming from the black-clad individuals, Jin's mind raced as he looked for a solution. Looking at his room which had now become a mess, Jin frantically looked for anything that could aid his escape. Looking around and seeing nothing, Jin clenched his teeth and looked at his skills section on his status window. Status . Name, Jin Horton. Rank, E. Strength, E. Agility, E+. Stamina, E. Intelligence, E. Mana capacity, E. Luck, E. Charm, D+. Profession. Assassin LVL.3. Martial Manual. Shadow Harvester, Greater Realm of Mastery. Dagger art primarily focused on lightning-fast attacks that slice through the air at astonishing speeds. The greater the mastery, the faster each swing becomes, making each attack harder to defend against. Void Link, Minor Realm of Mastery. Movement art that enables user to momentarily move between shadows. The greater the mastery, the longer the user can travel between shadows. Speed of user inside of shadow is tripled, and when exiting the shadow, user speed will be considerably boosted for a couple of seconds. Skills. E. Mana Conglomeration. A skill that enables user to gather all of their mana into a singular point and letting it explode in one swift attack that multiplies the attack power of the attack by a factor of 10. F. Light Eye. A skill that stimulates the neurons located in the eyes, enabling the user to enhance their vision. From being able to see further away, to being able to see at night and being able to slow down the world around him. Light Eye enables user to enhance ocular functions. Damn it. If only he had more skills. Despite the fact that he had access to a lot of skills thanks to his family, he was only allowed to choose 2. Any more than that and the elders within the family would start complaining as skills were limited and the demand was high. The reason he chose those 2 skills was because it best suited his profession, assassin. And precisely because his profession was assassin that he was currently in a bind. His profession specialized in stealthily killing his enemies from behind, not fighting against them head-on. That was not something he specialized in. Currently, he was using Light Eye, and despite the fact that everything around him was slower, he could barely hold on. This was especially so because his mana consumption was at an all-time high. If not for the few potions he had on him, he would have already long lost by now. Looking at mana conglomeration, Jean hesitated. This skill, although devastating, would force him to consume all of his remaining mana. Meaning that if he didn't kill them, he was done for. What made things worse for Jean was that he no longer had any mana recovering potions on him, meaning that this option was only for when he was on the verge of death. Clank. Swoosh. Parrying one of the black-clad individual's attacks, Jean ducked and avoided another attack coming from behind him. Jumping backward, Jean continued ducking and defending against the black-clad individuals. KHHH. The more he fought, the more tired Jean became. Looking towards the entrance of his apartment, Jean slowly moved in that direction. He needed to escape. He couldn't defeat them. He had to survive. He was the future of the Horton family. He couldn't die. Not when a lot of people had expectations on him. Making his way towards the door, Jean continued to struggle against the continuous attacks from the black-clad individuals. He had to live. He wanted to leave. Halfway through his way towards the exit of the room, Jean paused. Wasn't he just running away? He, Jean Horton, who had been trained since young with the best facilities and potions, was actually thinking of escaping. Did his talent only amount to this much? Thinking about Kevin and Amanda, the strength of Jin's grip on his dagger increased. Ever since coming to the lock, Jean has only been facing setbacks after setbacks. He lost his first place to both Melissa and Kevin, which was a huge blow to his pride. Though he was angry about it, this setback fueled his desire to grow and become stronger to claim back the spot of number one. He craved to be at the top. Then just as he felt he was becoming closer to his goal, news of Amanda killing a less than D-ranked villain spread across the academy. A seemingly impossible task, that no matter how many preparations Jean made, he couldn't accomplish, happened. This setback hurt him even more, as now there was another person who was above him. Moreover, it was from someone that he had been compared to ever since young. Amanda Stern, daughter of his rivaling guild, Demon Hunter. From that point, Jean felt as if the world was laughing at him. Wasn't he supposed to be the once-in-a-lifetime prodigy from the Horton family? How could he lose to an orphan and a couple of girls? Was it all just hype? Oh. Screaming at the top of his lungs, Jin's bloodshot eyes directly stared at the black-clad individuals before him. There's no way I am weaker to the likes of Amanda and Kevin. Lunging forward, Jin's attacks became more intense and brutal. He discarded all forms of defense and just wildly swung his daggers. He swung and swung and swung his daggers, almost as if he went mad. Clank. 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 No matter how many cuts appeared on his body, Jean ignored the pain and continued attacking. I am better than them. Turning his attention towards one of the black-clad individuals, Jean threw one of his daggers in his direction. Swoosh. As Jean threw the dagger, a whistle arose. Splitting the air, the dagger instantly appeared before the black-clad individual. Clank. Barely managing to block Jin's dagger, the black-clad individual took a couple of steps back. Spurt. Appearing behind the black-clad individual, Jean stabbed his straight into the throat, killing him instantly. Without looking back, Jean picked up his dagger and once again threw it at the nearest black-clad individual. Swoosh. Spurt. This time, the dagger hit the black-clad individual in the head, killing him instantly. It was evident that he was inferior to the black-clad individual he just killed. Turning his attention back towards the remaining three black-clad individuals, Jean took advantage of the fact that their formation was a mess to once again dash in the direction. Melting into the shadows, Jean disappeared from the view of the black-clad individuals. Huddling up together, with their back against each other, the three black-clad individuals waited for Jean to appear. Swoosh. Hearing a swooshing sound next to them, the trio simultaneously turned in the direction of where the sound came from and stabbed in that direction. Clank. Clashing against a hard object, pieces of wood scattered everywhere as a broken lamp appeared in their view. Gotcha. Appearing behind one of the black-clad individuals, Jin's dagger split the air as it pierced through his neck. Spurt. Thud. Moving backward to distance himself from the remaining black-clad individuals, Jean looked up and said, Huff, huff, 2 more to go. Just as he was about to once again attack, stumbling a couple of steps, Jean lost control of one of his legs and took a knee to the ground. Damn it, not yet. Screaming, Jean cursed as he felt all the muscles in his body spasm uncontrollably. An electrifying pain coursed through his body, threatening to ruin his sanity. It was so painful that he could barely scream in pain. His body was riddled with cuts, and his clothes were dyed red in blood. But that wasn't the only reason why he was suffering so much. The muscles within his body were in even worse shape as they continuously spasmed and shook. No. Clenching his teeth and suppressing the pain coursing through his body, Jean couldn't help but be reminded of his most recent days where he trained every day. Because of how much he wanted to catch up to Kevin and Amanda, Jean increased the intensity of his workout. In the end, all of his excessive training resulted in his body becoming more fatigued and sluggish compared to when he was at his prime. Despite the fact that he consumed potions continuously, potions couldn't fully heal the micro-tears in his muscles that came from overworking himself. The only cure for that was rest. But because Jean was blinded by power, he neglected that and as such resulted in his current conditions. His every movement hurt like hell, and despite trying his best to not think about it and ignore it, the pain was slowly becoming sharper and more acute with each passing second. Staring at the two black-clad individuals who seemed to have noticed his predicament, Jean clenched his teeth. I can't LOs. Gathering all of the remaining mana in his body, Jean looked at the two remaining black-clad individuals and prepared to use his skill, mana conglomeration. He knew that even if he used the skill, he was destined to die. But at least he wanted them to die with him. Snorting, Jean thought back at his childhood. You are going to be the best. Now no one can beat you. I am so proud of you. You are the pride of the Horton family. Memories of how everyone around him had been praising his talent and excellence replayed in his mind. He had grown up thinking that maybe they were right. Maybe he really was the chosen one. Maybe he was a cut above the rest and was the one that would lead humanity in the fight against demons. He remembered envisioning people erecting statues of him and worshipping him. That was what his future was destined to be. Thinking thus far, Jean couldn't help but snort. What chosen one? What prodigy? He was merely a talented individual that had all the resources available to him. In the end, the only reason why he was a step above the others was because of the top-end facilities and resources he had been provided with since young. Thinking back at it now, it probably was true. But the realization came too late. He was about to die, so what did it matter if he realized he wasn't actually as talented as he thought he was? Looking back at the two black-clad individuals, Jean stood up and took a stance. Talented or not talented? What did it matter when he was about to die? If he died, he had to at least kill the people that were after him. Crazily looking at the two black-clad individuals, Jean screamed. Come at me, you bastards. Swoosh. Swoosh. Heeding Jin's words, stabbing in Jin's direction, the two black-clad individuals simultaneously aimed at his head and heart. Closing his eyes, Jean gathered all of his remaining mana and prepared to unleash his skill. Click. However, before Jean could do anything, the world around him became dyed in white as the sound of two heavy objects falling could be heard. Thud. Thud. What? Slowly opening his eyes, Jean froze in shock at the sight before him. Step, step. Walking in front of Jean, the figure of a youth with jet black hair and deep blue eyes could be seen holding onto his sword. Turning around and staring at Jean with emotionless eyes, the youth coldly spoke. How pathetic. The Author's POV. Chapter 68, The Massacre of Hallberg, 3. How pathetic. Looking back at those two emotionless eyes, Jin's mouth opened and closed a couple of times. Though he tried, no words came out from his mouth. Thud. Kneeling on the ground, Jean lowered his head and stared at his blood-soaked clothes. Those words hit him straight into the heart. No matter how much he wanted to refute, he couldn't. He couldn't even defeat a bunch of nobodies, and yet he dreamt of people erecting statues of him. How pathetic. No other words better matched how Jean felt at the moment. Expressionlessly staring at Jin's sorry figure, Ren spoke. Is this all your pride amounts to? Staring at the ground, Ren's words went from one ear to the other, the world around Jean became dyed black and white, and all sound around him became faint. Seeing Jin's state, walking next to him, Ren looked down on him. So this is the real Jean Horton, huh? An insecure brat with an overly inflated ego. That's who Jean Horton was. Only in his darkest moment did his true personality become evident. People around him thought of him as a genius and a prodigy. They lauded his talents and efforts continuously, but in the end, all that did was fuel his ego and insecurities. Just like a castle made out of cards, all it took was a simple push, and everything came crashing down. Bam. Staring at Jin's sorry figure for a couple more seconds, Ren raised his foot and kicked him in the stomach. Ka. Feeling a strong force on his abdomen, Jin curled on the ground as he gagged multiple times. To think your pride only amounted to this much, all it took was a couple of setbacks and this is the result, pathetic. Walking over to Jin, Ren grabbed him by the hair and dragged his face towards his. You disappoint me. Pa. Slapping Jin on the face once, Ren released his hair and flung him to the side as if he was a piece of garbage. I honestly couldn't care less if you died, but... Looking at Jin's pathetic figure for a couple of more seconds, Ren turned around and headed towards the exit of the room. As he left, in an almost inaudible voice, he mumbled. I didn't want to discard such an important chess piece. Watching Ren's figure leaning against the wall, Jin looked up and weakly said. You're that guy called Rendover, right? As if he didn't hear Jin's voice, Ren kept walking towards the exit of the room. Taking Ren's silence as confirmation, bitterly smiling, Jin looked down and softly mumbled. It's you, isn't it? Ha. Who would have thought another person stronger than he had shown up? Though he didn't know the full extent of his power, he knew he killed those two black-clad individuals in a matter of seconds. It was so fast that even he, someone who specialized in speed, couldn't react. If even he couldn't react to it, didn't that mean he was stronger than him? Looking up at the ceiling of the room, Jin covered his eyes with his arm. Why is this happening to me? What did I deserve for this to happen? Yet again his pride took another dent. Just when he thought he was closer to his goal, another obstacle showed up to screw up his plan. Bang. Fiercely punching the ground, Jin screamed. Tell me why. Why is this happening to me? Hearing Jin's hysterical screams, Ren's footsteps halted. Looking back at him, he said. Why shouldn't this be happening to you? Fiercely staring at Ren, Jin glared at him and said. What do you know? You wouldn't understand. Indifferently looking at Jin, Ren opened his mouth and coldly said. Why wouldn't I understand? What did you actually do to make yourself stronger? Train. Spar. Or suck onto your family's wealth and fame? What are? Before Jin could open his mouth to refute, cutting Jin off, Ren continued. Did you ever fight with your life on the line? Did you actually ever think about what the others had to sacrifice in order to get to where they were now? You keep comparing yourself to Kevin, but do you even know what he went through to get to where he is now? You're not worthy of comparing yourself to him. Every main character had their own setbacks. Kevin from a very young age fought with his life on the line, Amanda was alone for the most part of her life, Emma and Melissa too had their very own setbacks that shaped who they were now. Yet, despite all of those setbacks, they fought through it and got to where they were now. Jin. What setbacks did he ever face? With his family shielding him, Jin comfortably lived his life as a rich second-generation young master that was continuously fed the best resources. He always had an easy life with no setbacks or reality checks that helped him mature. He was merely an overgrown child with childish ambitions. What right did he have to be prideful and claim to be the best? Hearing Ren's words, Jin fiercely glared at him and shouted. Are you telling me all my effort wasn't worth crap? All the blood, sweat and tears he shed when he trained? All the days where he would sacrifice his sleep to train and become stronger, was that all useless? Without looking at Jin, Ren looked at the room. Pointing towards the black-clad individuals he coldly said. What does it matter if it was useful or not? In the end, you're the one that almost got killed by a bunch of nobodies. Taking a couple of seconds to look at the room which was now a mess, Jin looked at the corpses of the black-clad individuals in the room and clenched his fist. Bullshit. You've blabbering nonsense since coming here, what do you know? Holding his stomach, with the aid of the wall, Jin weakly stood up. You know nothing about me nor what I've been through. What I did to get to where I am. How much effort I put to get to where I was, Moving one step at a time, Jin walked in Ren's direction. How dare you come to me and talk to me as if you know anything about me? What do you know about me? The closer he got to Ren, the more powerful his voice became. Who are you to criticize me when you hide your power like a sewer rat? Tell me. Remaining silent, and ignoring Jin's words as he slowly moved closer in his direction, Ren's face remained expressionless. There was not a once of anxiety nor fear on his face, just pure indifference. Acting as if you know me. One step at a time, Jean slowly made his way towards Ren. Halt. Stopping in front of Ren, Jean looked at him straight into the eyes and shouted. You have no right to talk to me like that when you know nothing about KHHH. Staring at Jean, who was only a few inches away from him, Ren extended his hand forward and grabbed his neck. KGHHH. Raising his body in the air, Ren coldly said. For someone who acts almighty all the time, you don't seem that impressive to me. KHHHH. Let go. Suddenly being lifted in the air by Ren, Jean struggled to speak as he swung his legs in the air. It's useless. Firming his grip on Jin's neck, Ren looked at him in the eyes and spoke. When you sleep, when you eat, or when you're doing whatever you are doing, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember my hand at your throat as you heavily gasp for air and powerlessly lay in my grip. Pausing, whilst retaining his hold of Jin's neck, Ren emotionlessly looked at Jean, who kept trying to free himself from his grip. KHHH. Damn it. Let go. In the end, no matter what Jean tried to do, he couldn't free himself from Ren's grip. All he could was scream and curse helplessly. KHHH. Increasing the strength of his grip to shut Jean up, Ren continued. Engrave this moment inside of your mind, realize that no one cares about that stupid pride of yours, whilst everyone around you is getting stronger, you're the only getting weaker. For your whole life, I want you to remember this moment, this humiliation. Remember the moment where your pathetic self almost lost to a bunch of henchmen. Remember me, Rendover, beating you. The more he listened to Ren's powerful voice, the less Jean struggled. Eventually, he stopped struggling altogether. Never before had he ever felt so weak. Feeling the strong grip on his neck, Jean realized at this moment how truly weak he was. The more Ren spoke, the more Jean wanted to deny what he was saying. He wanted with all his being to release himself from his grip and beat him to a pulp. How dare you? I'll kill you. Just wait for the moment we return back to the academy, I'll ruin your life. All sorts of vengeful thoughts crossed his mind as he thought of the moment when he would free himself from his grip. As long as he got free, he would definitely. Pausing his thoughts for a second, Jean had a sudden thought. He would be able to get free, right? There was no way Ren was going to kill him. It's not like he would kill a fellow student, right? Staring back at those two emotionless eyes that seemed to be able to read through his soul, Jean shuddered. What's this? Feeling his hands shake, Jean felt an unfamiliar emotion wash over him. An emotion that not even when almost dying did he feel, fear. Looking back at those emotionless eyes, Jean felt naked. Almost as if every secret and thing about himself were laid bare before Ren's eyes to see. Trembling, Jean put his hands on Ren's forearms and pleaded. KHHH. Stop. Ignoring Jin's pleas, Ren's grip on Jin's throat increased even more. Discard that pathetic pride of yours if you ever want to get revenge for today. KHHA. Trying one last futile attempt to get oxygen in his system, Jin's face became blue and eventually, he passed out. Seeing Jean passing out, Ren loosened the grip of his throat. Although his actions might come back and bite him in the future, he did what needed to be done. Under the influence of Monarch's indifference, Ren cared nothing for his own feelings. It didn't matter what sort of actions this moment would cause to him in the future. In his eyes, at the moment, such small setbacks weren't something he cared for. Under the effects of Monarch's indifference, Ren viewed everything pragmatically. His every action was for his goal and his goal only. And to him, a broken chess piece was just as useless as a dead chess piece. As he spoke to Jean, Ren's every word and action was carefully thought of. Even under the effect of Monarch's indifference, Ren's memories as an author didn't disappear. Meaning that he knew Jin's character well. He knew about his insecurities and everything about him, from his pride to his circumstances. For someone as prideful as Jean, the more you insulted him, the more fuel you added to the fire. Entering Jin's room, Ren saw a broken Jean. It was as if he was looking at a dying flame, a flame that had no more fuel to burn upon. Everything Ren did at the moment was trying to reignite that flame. Only by truly humiliating him and breaking his pride into pieces could he make Jean return to normal. From the way Ren saw things, if things continued as they were, Jin's future would have been bleak. Though his actions may result in Jean hating him, Ren didn't care. What mattered to him was for Jean to return back to normal and for the story to continue as it should. He tried everything he could to fix Jean, and now, only time would tell if his efforts paid off. Click. Just as Ren was about to release his grip on Jin's throat, he heard a clicking sound from behind him. Turning his head around, towards the direction of where the sound came from, Ren saw the door slowly opening, and appearing from the other side of the door was Kevin's figure. Entering the room, Kevin froze. Looking at Jin, who was being held by the neck, Kevin slowly looked at the person who was holding him. Then, his eyes met Ren's. The Author's POV. Chapter 69, The Massacre of Hallberg, 4. Hey, why did you st? Appearing behind Kevin, Emma entered the living room, and just when she was about to speak, she stopped halfway through her sentence and gasped in shock. Following Emma, Amanda entered the room, and similarly to Emma, she gasped in shock. 3 sets of eyes all focused on one individual. Standing in the middle of the room, holding Jean by the throat, Ren's figure could be seen. Jean. Screaming, Emma took out her short swords and circulated her mana, following which a strong yellow hue started emanating from her body. Get away from Jay. Just when Emma was about to lunge at Ren, Amanda put her hand on her shoulder and stopped her. Don't. W-hat. Angrily turning around, pointing towards Ren, Emma glared at Amanda and shouted. You're just gonna stand here and let him do that to Jean? What is wrong with you? Shaking her head, Amanda looked at Ren with a complicated expression. Those eyes. Those were the same eyes that he had when he killed Elijah. Though she may come across as heartless in Emma's eyes, in reality, this was all for her sake. She could still vividly remember those eyes, the same eyes that killed Elijah back in the afterparty. If Emma fought against him, she stood no chance. Glancing at Kevin from the side, Amanda thought. Who is stronger? Thud. Dropping Jin's body on the ground, Ren raised his hands and said. He's still alive. Looking at Jin's passed-out figure on the ground, warily glancing in Ren's direction, Kevin spoke. What did you do to him? Looking back at Kevin, with his hands still in the air, Ren coldly said. I merely did what needed to be done. Frowning at Ren's words, Kevin looked at Ren in the eyes and said. And by that do you mean almost killing him? Shaking his head, Ren looked down at Jin. If I really wanted him dead, he'd already be dead. Following Ren's cold words, the room became quiet. Not even a pin drop could be heard as Kevin and Ren stared at each other. Emma. Breaking the silence was Kevin's voice as he glanced at Emma, who was behind him. Okay. Understanding his motive, Emma put her short swords back into her dimensional space and quickly moved to where Jin's body was. Seeing Emma move, Kevin took out his sword and pointed it in Ren's direction. Without taking his eyes off of him, he said. If you try anything funny, I won't hesitate to kill you. Indifferently glancing at Kevin, Ren didn't respond and just looked at Emma, who was slowly moving closer. Arriving before Jin's body, Emma warily glanced in Ren's direction. Looking back at Kevin, and after making sure Ren wasn't going to make any moves, she placed her finger on Jin's neck and measured his pulse. After a couple of seconds, turning around, Emma sighed in relief and said. He's still alive. Nodding his head, Kevin asked. How's his condition? Glancing back at Jin, Emma carefully looked at his body before saying. Not so good, he's heavily injured and has exhausted all of his mana. Frowning, Kevin looked at Jin's body before looking back at Ren. Now, tell us why dash. Boom. Cutting Kevin mid-sentence, just as the tension in the room was about to reach an all-time high, a loud explosion resounded across the room. The whole place shook. W-hat. Staggering a couple of steps, Kevin, Emma, and Amanda all turned their heads in the direction of where the sound came from. Step, step, step. Appearing from the other side of the door, holding a huge axe that was about the size of 2 people, a black-clad individual entered the room. Behind him, a huge hole appeared on the wall as dust and debris flew everywhere. Another one. Staring at the black-clad individual, Kevin, Emma, and Amanda immediately got into battle positions as they warily glanced at him. From his demeanor and aura, they instantly knew that he was different from the other people they fought before. If the others were like soldiers fighting a war, this man felt like a general that stood above his soldiers. He was definitely in a league of his own. So the boss has finally come. Looking at the black-clad individual who had entered the room, Ren instantly recognized who he was. He was the boss that Kevin and his party were supposed to fight to end the Hallberg arc. He was a less than D+ borderline C ranked individual, and only after bitterly fighting with their life on the line did Kevin and the rest defeat him. Things couldn't have become more troublesome. Staring the black-clad individual before him, Kevin couldn't help but complain. From the people that attacked him in his room to Jean and now this. Things were starting to become more troublesome with each passing moment. Looking at Emma and Amanda, Kevin nodded. Nodding back, Emma took out her short swords and Amanda took out her bow. Suddenly, a red hue shrouded Kevin's sword. Slowly, the more Kevin held onto the sword, the more intense the hue around the sword became. Sneaking a glance at Kevin's imposing figure, Emma spoke. "Can you tone it down a notch?" Looking at Emma, Kevin smirked and said, "Not a chance." Watching Kevin, Emma, and Amanda getting into fighting positions, Ren slowly backed off into the corner of the room and just stared at the black-clad individual that had entered the room. Fixing his grip on the sword, Kevin spoke. "Support me." "Support? Please, that's Amanda's job." Rebutting playfully, Emma winked at Amanda and dashed towards the black-clad individual. "My job is to beat him." Vwam. However, as soon as Emma moved, a strong bloodlust suddenly expanded from the black-clad individual. Following the bloodlust, a humongous pressure came crashing down on everyone. A jet-black hue expanded from the black-clad individual's body and hurled towards them like a tsunami. Crossing her arms, Emma shielded herself from the pressure. Taking a few steps back, Emma looked back at Kevin and Amanda. Both their faces became extremely grim. "This is much more serious than I thought." Stepping forward, Kevin fully released his D-ranked pressure. "Let me." Feeling Kevin's pressure, Emma couldn't help but look at Kevin in shock. Amanda too was shocked as her brows couldn't help but jump. "Why, oh, you broke through." "Yes, not so long ago." Bomb. Tensing his calves, the ground below Kevin cracked and his body shot like a cannon towards the black-clad individual. KHHH. Appearing in front of the black-clad individual, Kevin cut down diagonally with his sword. Clank. But right before his sword could connect with the black-clad individual, as though standing under a cascading waterfall, Kevin felt a tremendous force hitting his sword as his body was swept away. He didn't even have the chance to scream before finding himself flung in the air. Bam. Flying across the room, Kevin struck a wall. Kawa. Spitting saliva, for a split second, Kevin lost consciousness due to the tremendous force of the impact. "Kevin." Looking at Kevin, Emma and Amanda worriedly shouted. Fortunately, after a couple of seconds, Kevin managed to get up, but he didn't seem to be in a good state as blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. "Hey, are you okay?" Wiping off the blood in the corner of his mouth, Kevin nodded his head. "I'm fine." Cool. Staring at the black-clad individual before him, Kevin's grip on the sword increased. "He's strong." Solemnly looking at the black-clad individual that did not move an inch from his position since flinging Kevin away, Emma asked. "How strong?" "At least D+ or C rank, I'm not sure." "That's strong." Nodding his head, Kevin held his sword with one hand as he painfully held the side of his chest. "I probably fractured a couple of ribs, damn it." Gritting his teeth, Kevin looked at Amanda. Nodding her head, Amanda extended the string of her bow. Whoosh. 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 Releasing the bow, 3 arrows shot in the direction of the black-clad individual. As each arrow shot, the air split apart creating a whistling sound. At the tip of each arrow, mana was carefully concentrated to increase its destructive power. As the 3 streaks of light made their way towards the black-clad individual, Kevin looked at Emma who looked back at him. As if they read each other's minds, they dashed towards the black-clad individual from both the left and right flank. Clank. Raising his axe, the black-clad individual blocked Amanda's arrows and hacked it towards the ground. Boom. As soon as the axe met the ground, the whole place shook. The ground split apart and debris fell everywhere. Jumping up, Kevin swung his sword towards the black-clad individual's head, whilst Emma went for his feet. Block this. Bomb. Stomping his foot on the ground below the black-clad individual's feet cracked. Kaha. Halting her movements, Emma crossed her arms and blocked the debris that was shooting towards her. Clank. Wapaya. Blocking Kevin's sword from above, the black-clad individual screamed and flung Kevin away. Crrrrrrrr. Huff, huff, damn it. Sliding across the ground, Kevin heavily panted for air. Due to his previous fights, signs of exhaustion were already starting to show on his face. Looking beside him, Kevin saw Emma in a similar situation to his. Despite the fact that the fight had only just started, they were both already too exhausted to continue. The situation was starting to become dire. Gritting her teeth and turning her attention towards the corner of the room where Ren's indifferent figure stood, Emma couldn't help but glare at him and shout. "Hey you! Why aren't you doing anything?" Ignoring Emma, Ren's eyes remained fixed on the black-clad individual. Seeing Ren ignore her, just as Emma was about to curse at him, Kevin's voice stopped her. "Leave him be." "But there's a much more pressing matter than worrying about him, moreover." Looking back at Ren, Kevin said. "The fact that he's not interfering is much better than him attacking us from behind." Gritting her teeth, Emma nodded her head. Whoosh! Whoosh, whoosh! Once again, from behind, Amanda shot arrows, signaling for Emma and Kevin to continue. "Let's go." Dashing once again towards the black-clad individual, Emma and Kevin once again tried to split their attacks. This time, Kevin aimed for his heart whilst Emma aimed for his sides. Hoo-ah. Clank. 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 Holding onto his giant axe with both hands, the black-clad individual spun around blocking Amanda's arrows. As if a cyclone had entered the room, the black-clad individual spun madly. As he spun, everything near the black-clad individual, like a magnet, started getting sucked in his direction. KHHHH. Ah! He's using a skill. Halting their steps, Emma and Kevin tried to stop their attacks, but it was to no avail as they found their body getting sucked towards the black-clad individual. "Kevin, I can't hold on." Looking at Emma's struggling figure, Kevin turned back and looked back at Amanda, who kept shooting arrows like there was no tomorrow. Both of their faces were incomparably pale. It was evident that they were too fatigued any longer, and they would no longer be able to hold one. "Do I have no other choice?" Gritting his teeth, Kevin hesitated for a second before activating overdrive. Activating overdrive, Kevin felt every fiber of his body exploding with energy. His muscles bulged, and his veins became more apparent. Power coursed through his body. KHHH. Gritting his teeth and enduring the pain, Kevin glared at the black-clad individual and propelled his body forward. Ha-yeah. Noticing the change in Kevin, the black-clad individual stopped spinning and confronted Kevin head-on. Clank. 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 Sword and axe matched. As they clashed, after a few seconds, Kevin and the black-clad individual had already exchanged no fewer than 300 strikes. Kevin's strikes were fluent and fast, whilst the black-clad individuals were slow and heavy. As they fought, neither budged an inch. They were currently in a complete stalemate. Cuts and bruises appeared on both bodies as they continued to clash. Blood spilt everywhere. Neither had the edge, but it was only a matter of time. Looking at Kevin, Ren knew that he wouldn't last long. The more Kevin fought, the more his veins became more prominent. His muscles twitched and spasmed with each passing second that they fought. It was evident that Kevin was suppressing tremendous pain to retain his current state. As Ren continued watching the fight like a spectator, his eyes slightly paused on Jin's body. In the novel, Jin was supposed to be fighting with Kevin, Emma, and Amanda. With his help, they managed to defeat the boss and become heroes of the academy. However, Jin was no longer here. Jin's absence was showing. Kevin, Amanda, and Emma weren't enough to fight the black-clad individual. From the way things were going, Kevin and the rest would soon die. Ren knew he had to step in. However, currently, he needed to look for an opening. He knew that with his current strength, the only thing he could do was find an opening. That's why he waited. Like a predator. Ren was waiting for the right moment to strike, and that moment had finally come. Feeling the effects of overdrive wearing out, Kevin's body suddenly gave out and was helplessly flung all the way towards the other side of the room. Bomb. Crashing against a wall, Kevin fell to the floor. KHHH. Step, step. Laying on the ground, Kevin looked up towards the black-clad individual who was heading in his direction. Arriving before Kevin, the black-clad individual raised his axe, casting a large shadow over him. Staring at the giant axe above him, Kevin couldn't help but think. Is this how I die? Whoosh. However, just as the black-clad individual's axe was about to hit Kevin, a tremendous whistling sound could be heard from behind him as a silver streak of light quickly headed in his direction. Kevin Following Amanda's last-ditch attack, Emma appeared from behind the black-clad individual as both her short swords were dyed in a tremendous yellow hue. Die. Ooh. Noticing the tremendous power coming from the arrow and Emma's short swords, the black-clad individual screamed and a black sphere surrounded his body. Boom. An enormous explosion shook the whole room, and debris flew everywhere. After a couple of seconds, once the debris and dust cleared up, Kevin, Amanda's and Emma's figures could be seen passed out on the ground. Next to them, the black-clad individual, with the aid of the axe, stood with one knee on the ground. His clothes were all torn, and his figure was soaked in blood. No longer did he look as imposing as before. Though he was alive, he sustained heavy injuries. Hoo-wah. With the aid of his axe, the black-clad individual tried to stand up. Click. The first movement of the Keiki-style quick flash. However, before he could do so, hearing a clicking sound coming from behind him, his vision first became dyed in white before darkness overtook it. Thud. With a large thud, the black-clad individual's figure fell face-first on the ground. Appearing from behind him, holding onto his sword, Ren's indifferent figure appeared. Turning towards Kevin, Emma, and Amanda who were still alive but passed out on the ground, Ren said, "Thanks." The Author's POV. Chapter 70, The Week, 1. Holberg's sky was dyed in an orange hue. The sun was coming up from the horizon, but the scene reflected by the rising sun could only be described as tragic. Agents surrounded a certain mansion, and desperate cries and echoes resounded across the space. Wee-ee-oh. 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 The sound of ambulances traveling back and forth between the mansion and the hospital continuously resounded throughout the city of Holberg. Inside of them, either corpses or wounded people were being carried. Although the situation had been taken care of by the professors who killed all of the black-clad individuals before the agents could arrive, the aftermath of the chaos still remained. Students Kevin Voss, Amanda Stern, and Emma Rochefield. We heard the story. Outside the mansion, a formal agent wearing a black suit scribbled on a piece of paper as he talked to Kevin, Amanda, and Emma. We will ask for details later, so go back and rest for now. Our agents will take care of the rest. After asking Kevin, Emma, and Amanda a couple of questions, the agent dismissed them. It was evident that with everything that was going on, he was very busy. Agents were different than heroes. Agents were people specifically selected by the central government to take care of important incidents and assess the situation. They were comprised of non-combatants. Most of them had professions that were very useful for supporting roles or administrative-type jobs. Their job was to assess the situation and seen to later communicate it back to the central government who will later dictate under which jurisdiction the incident will be fall under. Either the Union or the central government, with the Union being responsible for incidents that involve demons and villains. Sir. Jean is. Hesitating, Emma looked up at the agent and asked, to which the agent replied with a short and curt reply. He's fine. Although his injuries aren't light, he should make a full recovery by the end of the week. Yes, understood. Satisfied, Emma didn't ask any more questions. Go back. We will shortly escort you to the hospital to get you guys checked. Thank you. Thanking the agent, Kevin and the rest followed another agent. As they walked, looking around, Kevin glanced at the other students. Many of them were crying and grieving. The people with whom they were happily chatting and joking the night prior had either died or were on the verge of dying. It was a truly saddening and horrific night. As he looked around, Kevin also found certain students helping out with the unexpected emergency. They were helping the agents and professors carry the corpses of their fellow classmates towards the ambulances. As they carried the corpses of their fellow classmates, the faces of the students could tell it all. Closing his eyes and turning his head away from the students, Kevin knew that this incident will forever be marked in the hearts of everyone present. No one will forget this day. Here. Arriving in front of a large tent where many students and professors were residing, Kevin couldn't help but notice how everyone looked exhausted. This was especially so for Donna, who had dark circles underneath her beautiful eyes. She must have overworked herself. Kevin thought as he along with Emma and Amanda found a place to sit. Despite having fought for the whole night, Donna along with Professor Novak were still trying their best to help the students. They cooperated with agents and students to try to get as many people safely out of the mansion. Not once, since the incident started, did Donna rest. This just went to show how much she cared about the students. Turning his attention away from Donna, Kevin's eyes couldn't help but drift towards a certain individual who was talking to an agent like many other students. He had jet black hair and deep blue eyes, and despite having been through the same situation as the others, differently from the others, he was in a better state than most people. Although his clothes were in a bit of a mess, he looked to be relatively unharmed. He didn't look like someone who had been through the same incident as the others. It's him. Glancing beside him, Kevin noticed that he wasn't the only one that was looking at him, as he noticed both Emma and Amanda looking at him from afar. Though their expressions were different, Kevin could tell that both of them knew that they weren't the ones that killed the black-clad individuals at the end. Although to the agents, evidence showed that he, Amanda, and Emma were responsible for killing the last black-clad guy, the three of them knew it wasn't actually them who killed him. This was especially so for Amanda and Emma, who attacked last. They were definitely supposed to die. They all knew that. Yet, when they woke up, they found themselves alive, and next to them was the corpse of the black-clad individual laying face flat on the floor without any signs of life. At first, they were confused. Did they kill him? Did that last-ditch attack manage to kill the black-clad individual? But they soon dismissed the idea. It was impossible. In spite of the fact that by the time they attacked he was already quite injured due to his fight with Kevin, Emma and Amanda knew their limits. Unless they were extremely lucky, there was no chance they could kill him. Their assumptions were later proven correct when they received the autopsy report regarding the black-clad individual from the agents. Though he was heavily injured, what killed him wasn't their last-ditch attack, but a clean sword cut straight into the heart. As soon as they found out this piece of news, they instantly realized that something didn't add up. The agents assumed that Kevin was the person responsible for killing the black-clad individual, but Kevin knew it wasn't him. Looking at Ren talking to the agent in the distance, two questions emerged in Kevin's mind. Who was he, and why was he hiding his strength? Waking up to the pungent smell of alcohol, covered in bandages, Jin's eyelids slowly opened. KHH. Looking up at the white ceiling illuminated by a white fluorescent light, Jin felt a throbbing sensation on his right temple, causing his face to crump up. After a couple of seconds, and after the pain passed away, trying to sit up straight, Jin suddenly felt a sharp pain coursing through his body, almost resulting in him screaming. Pumph. In the end, he could only helplessly lay down on the white hospital mattress. Once again staring at the white ceiling above him, Jin truly felt helpless. Everything felt like a blur to him. Fragmented memories of what had happened prior to waking up here appeared in his mind. The images of him almost dying and being held by the throat constantly replayed in his mind. It was only after a couple of seconds that Jin fully understood what had happened. At first, he couldn't quite place his finger onto the emotion he was feeling, but as time passed in the white hospital room, he finally could taste it. The bitter taste of defeat. Ah. Pita. What's this? Touching his cheeks, Jin noticed a few droplets of water falling down from his eyes. Ah, shit. Covering his eyes with his arm, Jin clenched his teeth. How pathetic. Pride. It first started when he defeated a less-than-G-ranked warrior when he was 8 years old. The looks on every adult's face in the room at that time were something that he still remembered to this day. Fear, pride, awe, shock, all types of emotions were displayed on the adults' faces as he brutally beat down an up-and-coming G-ranked hero raised by their guild. He didn't know what was going on back then, but that day something within him changed. The looks on the adults' faces. He couldn't get enough of it. Therefore, from that day, Jin trained and trained like there was no tomorrow. He was strong. He wanted people to idolize him more. He wanted them to know just how strong he was. As the days passed and he grew older, the looks on the adults' faces changed. If before they had any slight contempt, it soon disappeared. What replaced it was either fear or worship. There was no other emotion. He was getting stronger at speeds that were thought to be impossible for someone his age. Soon, he started beating F-ranked heroes that had been training for years without much effort. Ah, this feels good. Every time he beat someone, his heart would flutter. Worship me more. Fear me more. Revere me more. And along with the pleasure Jin felt whenever he would beat a strong opponent came a powerful realization. How strong he was and how weak they were. From that point on, everything suddenly started to click for him. That's right. He was special. He was the chosen one. He had something that others didn't. Talent and a good background. It was from that point on that he developed a pride that no one else had. The pride of being the best. At least that's what he thought. Laying down pathetically in the hospital bed with his body covered in bandages, Gene realized that his pride had turned into conceit. He had been deluding himself for a long time. First, it was Kevin, then it was Amanda, and just a night ago he almost died from a bunch of nobodies that were doing someone else's dirty work. His body was battered beyond belief and he couldn't even lift a finger. How pathetic. This humiliation, remember the moment where your pathetic self almost lost to a bunch of henchmen, remember me, Rendover beating you. Recalling those words, Jin's jaw clenched. However, it soon relaxed. As he recalled those emotionless eyes staring at him as if he was nothing, Gene felt an emotion he hadn't felt in a long time well from deep within him. I see, this sense of loneliness, fear, and helplessness is a first for me. They say men don't shed tears. Yet at the age of 16, Gene for the first time in a long time, cried like there was no tomorrow. He was strong yet so weak. The Author's POV. Chapter 71, The Week, 2. Yesterday, at around 9:45 p.m. Hallberg, a group of unidentified individuals attacked multiple students from the lock, killing 389 and crippling 107. Sitting on a comfy chair inside of a private hospital, I looked at the large TV screen on the wall. Currently, a male news anchor was reporting the happenings of the Hallberg accident. Next to him, a pretty female anchor added a few comments here and there. According to the investigation, no valuable information was gathered regarding the aggressors as they all killed themselves or died from unknown causes. According to reports, thanks to the support of Hero Rank 156 Donna Longburn and S-ranked Hero Connor Novak, the number of casualties didn't reach the 4-digit figures. This type of massacre on students had never happened before in the history of the lock nor humanity. What happened yesterday will forever be remembered as the massacre of Hallberg, and we can only extend our support and prayers towards the victims of this accident. Stacking the papers on the table, looking towards the camera, the news anchor's voice deepened. Now this gives rise to a new question. Is the lock really that safe of a place? Is the lock really the safe haven advertised by the central government and the union? Who should be held accountable for the death of those 389 people? I'm not sure about you, but... Clack. Bam. As I was listening, suddenly the TV shut off. Following which the sound of something hard smashing against the cold hard floor echoed across the hospital. Turning my line of sight towards where the sound came from, angrily standing up, a professor glared at what remained of the controller. Looking back at the TV, he shouted. What sort of nonsense are you talking about? Do they expect us to protect all of the students when we too were fighting for our lives? Do they not understand what we went through that night? Huh? Tell me. Professor Rim, please calm down. Professor Rim. Noticing the outburst, a couple of students and professors immediately headed towards the professor, trying their best to calm him down. Despite their struggle, the professor didn't calm down. It was only after more professors and students came that he finally stopped going on a rampage and calmed down. Tensions were at an all-time high. Not just the students, but the professors were heavily affected by the incident. Despite the fact that the professors had gone through a lot of similar situations, that didn't mean they too didn't feel terrible for what had happened. Be it students or professors. They all thought one thing. What if I was stronger? Could an extra life have been saved? Looking at the commotion, I shook my head. There were no what-ifs in the world. What had already happened. You either looked ahead or remained stuck in the past. Glancing at the students that sat next to me, their eyes were hollow. It was evident that they were traumatized by the incident. I sort of understood what they were going through. Having lost my parents at the peak of my dependence, I knew the feeling of losing loved ones. Some lost their best friends, some lost their romantic partners, or some even lost their siblings. Almost everyone lost something yesterday. As I stared at the students next to me, an indescribable sense of guilt welled up from within me. I had already mentally prepared myself for this outcome, but every moment I stayed in the hospital felt agonizing. The desperate cries of the parents of the deceased students rang throughout the whole hospital, tearing a piece of my heart along with it. It felt suffocating. Almost as if I was crammed inside of a small room with barely any oxygen to breathe. Only after turning the volume of my MP3 to the max did I manage to calm myself down. Phoo. Taking a long breath, I stood up and decided to head out to get some fresh air. The longer I stayed in this place, the worse I felt. I needed to get my mind off of things. Perhaps the best place is the rooftop. A quiet place with no one to disturb me. The rooftop was the perfect place to clear my mind. In a secluded space inside of the hospital, Donna was going through the records of the recent incident. Because of her reputation as a ranked hero, she managed to gain access to all of the footage of the cameras installed on the first floor. The video she was currently watching was filmed by a camera that recorded the hall for rooms 500 to 599. Naturally, it contained the battle between the students and the black-clad individuals. Though she was a bit hesitant, knowing she could get in trouble if found out, having gone through most of the reports handed in by the students, a certain report piqued at her curiosity. The last hit wasn't mine. That's what Kevin wrote on his report. The autopsy report from the agents on the D+ ranked black-clad whom was found next to Kevin and the rest showed that the individual was killed by a sword strike straight to the heart. Donna knew that apart from Kevin, there was no one else in that room that could use a sword. Emma used short swords. Amanda used a bow, and Jean used daggers. If the last hit wasn't his, then whose was it? After doing a bit more digging, Donna managed to get a hold of the autopsy report of the other black-clad individuals found inside of the room where Kevin and the rest were found. In total there were 6 black-clad individuals found in that room. Apart from the D+ ranked one, the remaining 5 were all E ranked. A stark contrast to the other one. However, what caught her attention wasn't their ranks. No. It was the conditions of the bodies. 2 of the 3 black-clad individuals were found without their heads. Moreover, once again, they died due to a clean sword cut. This was a drastic difference compared to the other 3 which were without a doubt killed by a dagger due to the depth of the cut as well as the size of each stab. Matching the timing with the footage, Donna knew that inside of the room at that time Kevin and the rest had still not gone to aid Jean. Meaning that there was an external factor in play. This student. Indeed, after looking at more footage, there was a student who caught her attention. From head to toe, he was ordinary in every way. Inside the video, the man in question was not doing anything out of the ordinary. When the black-clad individuals appeared, he was nowhere to be seen. It was as though he had disappeared. If not for the fact that she had been actively looking for him, she would have assumed he had died along with the many other students that night. What happened next was even more mysterious. Suddenly at 9:58 p.m., turning around the corner to the 500 to 599 corridor, he appeared. Whenever he walked, black-clad individuals would mysteriously fall. Because of the chaos, if someone didn't look carefully, they wouldn't have noticed this small detail. It was so subtle that no one around him realized what had happened. Even after zooming the camera and slowing the video down, Donna couldn't find out what was happening. The more Donna looked, the more she was confused. Something didn't add up. As she zoomed the camera towards his face, his demeanor in general didn't add up. It wasn't something a student should have. That emotionless and indifferent attitude was only something top heroes that had gone through many similar ordeals had. What happened next was even more confusing. He entered room 575. The exact room where Jean was staying as well as where Kevin and the rest entered afterward. Fast-forwarding the clip, Donna saw Kevin, Emma, and Amanda sweeping through the rest of the black-clad individuals in the hall. Following which they soon too entered room 575. The same room the men in question had entered. A couple of minutes after they entered, Donna saw the last black-clad individual making his way towards the same room they entered. Using his power, he broke through room 575, creating a massive hole in the wall. After that, though she couldn't see what was going on, she could hear the sound of metal clashing against each other followed by loud screams. 10 minutes after the black-clad individual entered the room, a large explosion shook the room where subsequently, a minute after the explosion, a brilliant white light dyed the surroundings. Because of the light, the camera froze up for a solid minute. By the time the screen came back to normal, everything was quiet and no one came out from that room. After thinking for a bit, Donna figured that during that minute where the camera froze, the student in question left the scene. Taking out her tablet and after matching his face with her database, she immediately found the identity of the student in question. Ren Dover. She did have a small recollection of him. It was during the first day of training. He had left an impression on her that day. Not a good one. She had placed him on her blacklist that day thinking that he wasn't worth having expectations for. Of course, although she placed him on her blacklist, that didn't mean she gave up on teaching him. She only gave up on having expectations of him. But after watching the footage, maybe she needed to reevaluate her previous opinion of him. Ring. 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 Just as Donna's curiosity was increasing, her phone suddenly rang. Frowning, she took it out and answered the call. Listening to the call, her posture instantly straightened. Nodding her head multiple times, she politely said, "Yes, yes, yes, I will be there immediately." Tack. Hanging up the phone, Donna quickly got her stuff and rushed towards the entrance of the hospital. Why out of all times did they have to come now? Officials from the union had arrived. Clank. Closing the door behind her, only the video Donna was watching was left to play in the emptied room. Standing on the rooftop of the hospital, I took a long breath and looked at Hallberg. The sky was blue and the sun brightly lit the city. No signs of what had happened the night prior were evident, and apart from the occasional ambulances moving to and fro in the city, it seems like the chaos had died down. Everyone was just going about their day almost as if nothing had happened yesterday. Maybe it was better this way. As I was looking at Hallberg from the rooftop, I couldn't help but look back at the incident. Especially what had happened while I was under the effects of Monarch's indifference. I thought about this before, but Monarch's indifference was an extremely scary skill. I didn't think too much about it before, but under the influence of Monarch's indifference, it felt as if my body was being controlled by someone other than me. It felt as if I was under the depths of the sea and my body was moving on its own. Despite the fact that I knew what I was doing, the process and how I was doing things was beyond my control. It was like anything aside from my goal didn't matter. Regardless of what I did to achieve the goal, it didn't matter. Be it sacrificing lives or killing. As long as it helped me achieve the goal, it was enough. That's how it felt. Scary. Very scary. Especially since my actions may have resulted in Jean and the others forming a negative opinion of me. Either way, regardless of how I wanted things to have played out, it was too late for me to regret it. You can't change the choice you made, all you can do is not let it ruin you. This quote perfectly described how I felt at the moment. I could only move forward and go along with the changes around me. Clank. Suddenly, as I was in deep thought, the sound of the rooftop door opening echoed across the rooftop. Turning around, my eyes soon paused on a black-haired, red-eyed youth. Ah, seriously. The Author's POV. Chapter 72, The Week, 3. An awkward silence enveloped the rooftop. Apart from the occasional chirps from the birds flying in the sky, no other sound resounded across the space. Step, step, step. Arriving on the edge of the rooftop, standing next to me, Kevin placed his hands on the handrails and looked at Hallberg in the distance. Aside from the occasional ambulance squeals coming from below, the city of Hallberg looked calm and peaceful. As Kevin and I watched the city in silence, a strange yet relaxing atmosphere enveloped us. It was as if all of our worries were gone for a split second. For a short period of time, neither of us spoke. We just calmly watched the city below us. It's peaceful, isn't it? After a short pause, breaking the silence, whilst looking at the city below him, Kevin opened his mouth. It sure is. Nodding my head whilst keeping my eyes on the city below, I responded. From where I stood I could see children and adults playing in the park across the hospital. People walking along the roads to get to work, and cars honking at each other. It really was peaceful. Thanks. Once again breaking the silence, Kevin thanked me. Closing my eyes, I didn't respond immediately. I didn't know how to respond. If I answered, wasn't I just basically confirming to Kevin that I was indeed the one that had killed the black-clad individual? But sure. In the end, those were the words that came out of my mouth. Glancing at Kevin from the side, I had come to the realization that denying was pointless. Having created Kevin myself, I knew that he wasn't a brain-dead protagonist. No matter how much I tried to deny it, he had already figured out what had happened. What was the point of denying something that was already obvious? Hearing my reply, whilst still looking at the city in the distance, Kevin smiled. You know, you seem like a completely different person compared to yesterday. Pausing, Kevin briefly glanced at me before leaning back on the handrail and once again looking back at the city. You look more human. Taken aback for a second, recalling what had happened the night prior, bitterly smiling, I responded. Well, the circumstances forced me to be that way. Circumstances, huh? Repeating the word a few times, Kevin's brows knit for a few seconds before relaxing. Glancing at me from the side, he said. Were they the same circumstances that caused you to attack Jean? Bitterly shaking my head whilst gazing at the clouds in the sky, I smiled. Would you believe me if I told you it was for his own benefit? Tilting his head, Kevin thought for a moment before nodding. More or less. Surprised, I turned my head in Kevin's direction. What made you agree with what I said? I wouldn't have believed you if it was before, but having just come back from visiting Jean, I along with the others managed to notice a change in him. I don't know what you did, but Jean has become a lot easier to talk to. Though he still is somewhat arrogant, it isn't as bad as it was before. Moreover, the way he looked at me was different. Placing his finger on his chin, Kevin thought for a bit before saying, if before there was a hint of hostility, right now it's completely gone. It's as if he is a new person. At least that's how I feel when I look at him now. Listening to Kevin speak, I was honestly quite surprised. It seems like what I did under the effects of monarch indifference paid off. It was a gamble. A risky one at that, but I'm glad Jean managed to somewhat pick himself back up. Though I don't know whether he still hated me for what I did, as long as he was back to normal, that was all that mattered to me. Similar to Kevin, with me being the author, I knew Jin's personality the best. I knew that even after what I had done to him, he wouldn't target my family. With the pride he had, he would never attack someone else's family. For someone like him, if he resorted to such a method, he had already lost. Perhaps, this was why I went extra harsh on him once I was under the effects of monarch indifference. But I wasn't sure. If I repeated what I did to someone else that wasn't Jean, I could only imagine the consequences of my action. Just imaging it sent shivers down my spine. Once again, my apprehension towards monarch indifference grew. I quickly needed to adjust my mentality. Seeing me fall into deep thought, Kevin hesitated for a bit before saying something that had been bugging his mind since yesterday. Why are you hiding your skills? Hearing Kevin's voice, I snapped out of my thoughts. Processing his question for a couple of seconds, I shook my head and looked at him with a trace of pity in my eyes. You should know the answer better than anyone else. Leaning backward on the handrail, Kevin thought for a moment before breaking into a light chuckle. I guess you're right, it was stupid of me to ask. Smiling, I took a better look at Kevin. One thing I noticed as I looked at Kevin was that under his eyes were thick dark circles. Thinking for a bit, since he used overdrive, I figured he was probably exhausted. Though the skill was very strong, its side effects were just as strong as the skill was. From the way Kevin looked, it seems like he still needed a couple of days of rest before being able to recover fully. Well, that's my cue. After looking at the city below for a couple of more minutes, I closed my eyes and decided to leave. Although it wasn't long, my talk with Kevin managed to somehow calm me down. Without saying anything, Kevin nodded. Basking under the sunlight, he was already lost in his own world. I couldn't blame him though. With what had happened, I'm sure he was blaming himself a lot. That's just who he was. Letting out a long sigh, just as I was about to leave, thinking for a bit, I looked at Kevin and solemnly said, "Before I leave, let me tell you something important." What? Seeing how solemn my voice was, Kevin snapped out of his thoughts and his ears perked up. Glancing left and right to make sure no one was looking, I looked at Kevin straight in the eye and said, "Makeup remover serves as a great women repeller. Bye." Clank. Closing the door behind me, I leisurely walked down the stairs. After a short pause, Kevin's laughter echoed throughout the rooftop. It was so loud that I could even hear it all the way down to where I was. Shaking my head, I too smiled. Although he was trying his best not to show it, I knew that he was currently under immense pressure. Differently from me, however, his guilt stemmed from the fact of how weak and helpless he felt as he watching his fellow classmates die before his eyes. In spite of him feeling a different kind of guilt compared to me, I sort of sympathized with how he was feeling. Hopefully, my little joke helped him take his mind off of things for a bit. Shaking my head one more time, I headed downstairs back to the hospital lobby. It's tough being the main protagonist. Welcome. Arriving at the entrance of the hospital, Donna brightly smiled. Standing in front of the hospital entrance, a muscular male with a clean-shaven head and sunglasses indifferently glanced at his surroundings. His demeanor was cold and his expression didn't change even after Donna came. Slightly nodding his head towards Donna, the muscular man's face remained aloof. Smiling slightly in response, Donna looked around to see if there was someone else. According to the call she received, there were two important figures coming today. Donna. And just when she was about to look for the other person, it was at that moment that a charming voice and scent flowed towards Donna. Just by hearing the voice, Donna could instantly tell who it was. "It's good to see you again, Monica." Peeking from behind the muscular man, a young girl with dark orange hair came out. Surrounded by a bright aura, Monica happily smiled in Donna's direction. She had crystal clear blue eyes and measured up to 160 centimeters in height. Contrary to Donna's seductive beauty, her beauty leaned more towards the innocent side. "Haha, how long has it been since we've seen each other?" "I'd say half a year." That's actually shorter than I thought." "Well, with how busy you usually are, it'd be a surprise if half a year felt short." Exaggeratedly sighing, Monica looked at Donna with envy. "Ah, maybe I should have gone to teach at the lock with you." Smiling, Donna shook her head. "Your fault for choosing money over happiness. I'm starting to really regret my decision now." Looking at the girl before her, Donna couldn't help but think back at her past. She along with Monica graduated from the lock. However, differently from her, Monica chose to join the union instead of teaching at the lock. At that time their powers were about the same, but 5 years later, thanks to all of the support she got from the union, she was now ranked 27 in the hero ranking. She was nicknamed the Sunset Witch. Her powers were so devastating that the union had placed heavy emphasis on her. They had high hopes for her. Due to how outstanding she had been in recent years, they all thought that she was going to be the next SS-ranked hero. That's how outstanding she was. "Monica, stop chatting, and let's get our jobs over with." Disrupting their conversation, the tall muscular man spoke. "Geez, why are you always so uptight with everything, George?" Ignoring Monica, the tall muscular man named George glanced at Donna. He was hinting at her to hurry up. "How about you first come into the hospital instead of waiting at the entrance?" Taking the hint, looking around her, Donna noticed that the atmosphere around them was tense. Almost suffocating. This was partly due to how enormous their presences were. Although they weren't consciously releasing it, it was still felt by everyone around them. "This way." Without skipping a beat, gesturing for them to follow her, Donna walked towards a more secluded space in the hospital. "Alrighty." Happily smiling, Monica and George followed Donna. Only after they left that everything returned to its usual calm. Arriving at a more luxurious space inside of the hospital, Donna brought them into a private room. Gesturing for them to sit down anywhere, Donna took off her coat and sat on a sofa. "So what do I owe you the pleasure of coming here for?" Glancing at George for a second, Monica raised 2 fingers. "We have 2 objectives to achieve. 1 is to deliver a certain equipment to the agents, 2, see a certain student." Hearing the first part of her sentence, Donna nodded. Naturally, in order to accurately measure if demons and villains were involved in the incident, special equipment was required. If not, it would be much harder to determine whether this was done by a villain or someone else. However, after hearing the second half of Monica's sentence, Donna frowned. "Who is the student you got your interest in?" "Kevin Voss." "Kevin?" "Yes." Hearing Kevin's name being mentioned, Donna's frown deepened. "What do you need to see him for?" Cutting Monica before she could answer, George spoke. "It's none of your business." "Oh. I would like to disagree since he is my student." Raising her brow, Donna looked at George and released her S-ranked pressure. Humph. Not wanting to be outdone, George too released his pressure. Instantly the room shook. "Hey, both of you calm down." Noticing that the situation was quickly getting out of control, Monica stepped in. Whoosh. Instantly both of their pressure disappeared as a more monstrous one enveloped the both of them. KHH. KHHH. "Monica, stop, I get it." Enveloped by such monstrous pressure, both Gurge and Donna felt as if a truck had rammed into them. They could barely move their bodies. Seeing that they had both calmed down, Monica's pressure disappeared. "Phew, you know I don't like doing this sort of stuff." Flicking her hair to the side, Monica leaned back on her chair. Looking back at Donna, she said, "It's nothing worrisome, we just wanted to have a nice chat with him." Helplessly sighing, Donna looked at Monica with a complicated expression before saying, "You aren't thinking of recruiting him, right? If so, discard that thought immediately. He still needs to graduate from the lock before he is allowed to step foot into the union. We know, we aren't here to recruit him, but more like observe him." Seeing the slight hostility in Donna's eyes, Monica reassured her. Lightly tapping on the armrest of the chair, Monica looked at the ceiling of the room before softly mumbling. We also have a couple of other people in mind, but they might be harder to recruit since their parents might want them in their guild. Pretending to not have heard the latter half of her sentence, Donna nodded. If you promise me you won't be doing anything out of order, I can allow you to meet him. Thank you, Donna, you're the best. Happily standing up, Monica jumped in Donna's direction. Stop, don't come near me. The Author's POV. Chapter 73, The Week, 4. Hospital, 4th floor. Emma's face was rather strange as she followed Kevin from behind. As they walked, she couldn't help but notice Kevin's shoulders occasionally tremble from time to time. Kevin, about Jean. Just when Emma was about to mention the matter regarding Jin's sudden change in attitude, she was suddenly disrupted by a small burst of laughter. Ha ha ha. Though Kevin tried his best, he finally couldn't hold back and laughed out loud. Makeup remover serves as a great women repeller. Thinking back at what had happened on the rooftop, Kevin couldn't help but laugh out loud. Though the joke wasn't even that funny, it's just the way he said it. His face was so serious. Ah, I can't, ha ha ha. Ah. Looking at Kevin, who had just lost his composure, Emma didn't know what to say. She couldn't quite grasp what was happening before her. In the past, Kevin had always been very calm and mature. It felt as if nothing could shake him. But what was going on with him today? Had all the stress got to him? Kevin, noticing Emma's face, forcefully held his laughter back and immediately waved his hands as a form of apology. Keep going. I'm all good now. So I was talking about Jean. PFTTT. Just when Emma was about to continue speaking again, she was once again disrupted by a loud chuckle. This time, she couldn't help but get annoyed. Glaring at Kevin, her tone raised a few pitches. If you want to laugh, just laugh, but don't waste my time. Ha ha ha, I'm really sorry, but, ha ha, hey Emma, what do you think of makeup remover? Holding onto his stomach, Kevin's face was completely red. Speechless by Kevin's random question, Emma shook her head before responding. I wouldn't know since I don't use makeup. As soon as Kevin heard Emma's response, his smile froze. After a short pause, Kevin returned to his usually calm expression. Ah, that pretty much ruined the joke. What joke? Doesn't matter anymore, continue with what you were saying. As if nothing had happened, Kevin nodded at Emma, urging her to continue what she was saying. Sigh, I give up, anyhow I was just about to talk up. Shaking her head and sighing at Kevin's sudden change in attitude, Emma tried to continue what she was trying to say but soon stopped halfway through her sentence. Shortly after, an exclamation escaped from her mouth. Ah. Emma. Noticing something odd about Emma's behavior, Kevin glanced at her. Staring in the distance, Emma's eyes sparkled. Her face soon dyed red in excitement. What's going on? Confused, following Emma's line of sight, Kevin's eyes soon paused on a trio walking in their direction. Instantly, Kevin recognized one of the three people. Donna Longburn, his class tutor. Walking with her head down, she looked worn out. Her hair was a mess and her expression was that of utter defeat. It looked as though she had just come back from a tough battle. Looking at her expression, although Kevin didn't know what had happened, he couldn't help but feel a trace of pity for her. Next to her, a tall muscular man with a bald head and sunglasses indifferently glanced at his surroundings. There was this sort of regal feeling coming from him. Almost as if he was a massive lion that ruled over an expansive territory. Although for the most part, his face was indifferent, from time to time, Kevin was able to notice him clicking his tongue in the direction of the last person. Standing in front of them, a young girl with dark orange hair happily chirped throughout the halls of the hospital. From appearances alone, she looked to be a few years younger than Emma. Her skin was crisp and pleasant, and she looked like a regular 14-year-old girl. Ah. Noticing something, the young girl's eyes excitedly looked in Kevin and Emma's direction. Pointing in their direction, the young girl urged Donna and the other guy to hurry up. Who is she? Noticing that something wasn't right, tilting his head in confusion, Kevin turned towards Emma. However, his question was met with air as Emma ignored him completely. After a couple of seconds, Emma ran towards the young girl as she shouted at her. Sister Monica. Emma. Seeing Emma coming her way, extending her hands forward, they soon embraced each other and laughed. Look at how much you've grown. Looking at Emma from head to toe, a trace of envy appeared on Monica's face. Hee hee, I'm now taller than you. That's not something you should be pointing out to someone who you call sister. He, you know I'm just messing with you. Smiling evilly, Emma tried to pat Monica on the head. Smack. Stop it, you brat. Smacking Emma's hand away, Monica's eyes landed on Kevin. Smiling, she said. You must be Kevin. Confused, Kevin confirmed before asking. Yes, you are. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere around him froze. Be it Emma, Donna, or the muscular guy. Everyone was staring at Kevin in utter shock. How did he not know the identity of the girl in front of him? Especially since she was one of the most popular heroes on Earth at the moment, just how out of touch with the world did someone have to be to not even be able to recognize her? Taken aback for a second, a trace of a smile soon appeared on Monica's face. Wow, this is a first. Someone who actually doesn't know me, how interesting. Confused, Kevin looked in Emma's direction. Face-blamming, Emma whispered. Hero rank 27, the Sunset Witch, Monica Jeffrey. Oh. Inside of a private room in the hospital, sitting in front of Monica, Kevin asked. So what did you call me here for? Calmly drinking a cup of tea, Monica briefly glanced at Kevin before softly mumbling to herself. So handsome. Excuse me. Covering her mouth and realizing her mistake, Monica looked away from Kevin. Oops, Kiam, I meant it's hot in here. Letting out a dry cough as though she was embarrassed, Monica took something out from her pocket and handed it to Kevin. Glancing at what was in Monica's hand, Kevin saw a black card decorated with fine silver patterns. Taking the card, Kevin looked at the fine print on the card. Union, Senior Executive Member, Monica Jeffrey. Seeing Kevin accept the card, Monica smiled and said. Let's keep it short, we want to recruit you into the Union. Kiam. Observing from behind, Donna coughed a couple of times. Under Donna's glaring eyes, Monica stuck her tongue out. Fine, let me rephrase, would you be interested in joining the Union after you graduate from the lock? Ah, so this was what this was about. Playing with the business card in his hands for a couple of seconds, Kevin soon gave it back. Eh? Student Kevin. I think you don't understand what's going on here. Me, rank 27 on the hero ranking, Monica Jeffrey is interested in you. I'm thankful for your interest, but I'm sorry, I'm not planning on joining the Union. With that, Kevin stood up and made his way towards the door. Hey you, what do I dash? Just as George was about to stop Kevin, raising her hand to stop George, Monica smiled. I'm liking him more and more. Ring. 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 Once again sitting on a chair in the lobby of the hospital, hearing the sound of my phone ringing, I quickly swiped right and answered the call. Employer. Yo, Small Snake. I heard about what happened in Hallberg. Alright, I did reveal to Small Snake who I was. He must have already caught wind of what had happened in Hallberg. Ah well, as you can hear I'm fine. That's great, I saw your message, what do you need from me? Thinking for a bit, I suddenly recalled messaging Small Snake a couple of days ago. Prior to when the incident happened. Right, I need you for a job. You're not going to tell me to invest in another stock, right? Nah, maybe another time. I need information this time. Information. Yup. Pausing for a second, Small Snake responded. Sure, as long as it's something within my capabilities I can do it. Hearing what he had to say, a smirk appeared on my face. Please, with your capabilities, even finding the information of some of the top guilds shouldn't really pose a problem for you. But well, he didn't need to know that I knew about his true capabilities. I want you to tell me all you can find about a guild called Galxicus. Galxicus. Yeah, you can do it right. Yes, but why are you specifically looking into that guild? Isn't that your parents' guild? Oh. So you dug onto my past. Yes. Hearing his blunt reply, I was taken aback for a second before I burst out laughing. Ha ha ha, I didn't know you were that interested in me. Better safe than sorry. Shaking my head, I crossed my legs and said. So. You think you're up for? However, halfway through my sentence, I paused. Employer. There was a good reason for my pause. That was because. What's your name? Standing in front of me, a young girl with dark orange hair smiled as she looked at me. Sorry, Small Snake, I might have to call you later. What do you? Tack. Hanging up the phone, I was utterly speechless. What was she doing here? Why was the Sunset Witch standing in front of me? Moreover, if I remembered correctly, wasn't she supposed to be recruiting Kevin and the others? Smiling, Monica placed her hand on her chin and scrutinized my body from top to bottom. After a bit, nodding her head, she said, "I can sense that you're practicing a pretty strong art. You must be pretty high ranked in your school, huh? What's your rank? What do you specialize in?" Under the barrage of questions, my brows twitched. Damn her and her special power. The reason why Monica was called the Sunset Witch wasn't just because of the color of her hair, but also because of her high affinity with flame scions. Whenever she moved, flames would engulf the area around her, devastating everything that she willed. That was scary, but if that wasn't enough, Monica had a skill that enabled her to detect what sort of art they were practicing. I had completely overlooked this fact. Damn. Monica. Appearing from behind Monica, Donna angrily stormed in her direction. Just as she was about to reach Monica, her eyes paused on me and her footsteps halted for a split second. Turning towards Donna, Monica pointed at me and said, "Ah, Donna. You came at the right time. I want to know more about this student. Let's go." Placing her hand on Monica's mouth, Donna forcefully dragged her out of the hospital. "But I'm not fin MHMMH. Stop harassing my students and leave already. NOOMHHHM." While I sat speechless looking at the scene before me, Monica tried her best to free herself from Donna's grasps. In the end, she failed and was soon dragged out of the hospital. Fortunately, judging from how she let herself be carried away by Donna, she was only slightly interested in me. Not enough for her to actually stop Donna from dragging her away. Wiping off the sweat that had accumulated on my forehead, I couldn't help but think, I guess I just dodged a bullet. The Author's POV. Chapter 74, Homecoming, 1. Lock, Class A, 25, Friday 4:45 p.m. Sitting in my usual seat, I listened attentively to the class lecture. Or at least I tried. Despite the fact that 2 weeks had passed since the Hallberg incident, the classroom's atmosphere wasn't as lively as it was back before the incident. Glancing at the classroom, I could see why. Almost a quarter of the students that used to sit around me were now gone. Despite not knowing many people, I found out, a couple of days after the incident, that Evan and Cassandra were part of the people that had died during the incident. The same two people that were part of my group. In spite of the fact that I didn't know them that well, the fact that two people I was acquainted with had died went to show how tragic those events were. Literally, anyone could have died that night. Alright, that marks the end of the lecture. Snapping me out my thought was the engineering professor's charming voice. Just like before, throughout the whole time I had stayed in the lock, she was the only professor that didn't pay special attention to lineage or rank. Whenever I asked her questions regarding the lecture, she would always patiently and calmly explain what I didn't understand. Therefore, although I didn't necessarily understand what she was teaching, I didn't hate this class. Right after the lecture ended and the professor left the classroom, everyone remained seated. That was because we still had to have our end-of-week tutor time. This was a small session we had every Friday, and it was where Donna, our tutor, would spend the last remaining 15 minutes of the day to share any announcements that have been made by the school. Clank. Right on cue, entering the classroom, Donna made her way towards the podium. Walking, as though the wind was blowing, each of her steps caused a thin purple undulation of magic power to spread across the classroom. Instantly the whole room fell silent. The pressure that emanated from her body caused everyone to stop whatever they were doing. It was evident that she wasn't in the best of moods, and everyone could feel it. Arriving in front of the podium, Donna staked a few papers on the table before clicking her tongue and dismissing them. Sighing, Donna looked at the classroom and spoke. "Alright, as most of you can probably tell, I'm not in the best of moods." Raising 2 fingers, she said, "I have 2 announcements for you guys today. 1, there will be a rank readjustment, and that why." Right after she finished the first half of her sentence before she could continue speaking, disrupting her speech were whispers that resounded throughout the whole classroom. Rank readjustments. It isn't even the midterms. What's going on? Smack. Quiet. Smacking her hand on the podium, a small shockwave swept through the classroom. As if a strong gust of wind had appeared, everyone was pushed back onto their seats. I included. As a result of her action, the hair I spent 2 minutes styling this morning was now a mess. Great. A couple of seconds after smacking the podium, Donna continued. If some of you are confused as to why your ranks are being readjusted, the answer is simple. It's because there's now less of you. For better or for worse, we have to readjust your ranking according to Academy protocols. Placing both hands on the podium, Donna's eyes swept through the classroom before she said, "So please be quiet and wait for me to finish announcing the new rankings before announcing the second announcement." Nod. Under Donna's piercing stare, everyone could only helplessly nod their head in agreement. Seeing everyone nod, a trace of a smile appeared on Donna's face. "All right, here are the new rankings." Tapping onto her tablet, Donna quickly read through a long list of names. Kevin Voss, still rank 1. Melissa Hall, still rank 2. Troy Direx moves up a rank and is now rank 17. Edward Smith moves up 5 ranks from 739 to 734. Pausing slightly, a slight frown appeared on Donna's brows. It was so subtle that only by paying close attention would anyone have been able to notice it. Lastly, Rendover moves up a total of 200 ranks and is now rank 1550. As soon as my name and rank were announced, I felt multiple eyes staring in my direction. Feigning ignorance, I tried my best to keep a stoic face. With what had happened in Hallberg, I had already expected this to happen. There was no use denying the fact that I had now caught the interest of a few important individuals. Though I didn't like the attention, there was no use crying over spilled milk. I also wanted to point out that the fact that my rank rising by 200 ranks may have contributed to adding a couple of extra stares. With Donna finally announcing my name, the rank adjustment came to an end. Following that, she cleared her voice and once again spoke. Though her voice was sweet, her tone was cold. "Kuum, for the second announcement, due to recent unfortunate events, after long and arduous hours of talk, the higher-ups have come to a unanimous decision to send the first years on a month-long break." Just as she finished announcing, right before anyone could celebrate, Donna instantly poured cold water over them. "But don't be too happy yet. After you return, there will be midterm exams, so more than a holiday, this is a short break before midterms." Mourns and sighs resounded throughout the classroom as the students all became crestfallen at the announcement. Well, out of all the people here, I was probably the one that was the most depressed by the announcement. With everything that went down these couple of months, I hadn't had time to focus on my school work. The midterms consisted of 2 exams. The theoretical and the physical. I wasn't worried about the physical exam since if I had to judge my strength, I was currently in the top 100. Maybe top 50 if I fought with my life on the line. But that didn't really matter. My goal was to one day reach the top 10. Being top 100 didn't really interest me in any way. Rank aside, what I was most worried about was the theoretical department. No matter how much I tried to study, I barely got any of the concepts they were talking about in classes. Don't get me wrong, it's not that I was totally hopeless, it's just that for some of the stuff I had to learn, I had to go back and relearn things that were taught back when I was supposed to be in middle school. With me training every day, I barely had enough time to study for the courses, let alone study middle school courses. After I agonized over the problem for a bit longer, I just threw it at the back of my mind. As an experienced procrastinator, I was used to leaving problems till near the deadline. "All right, this is the end of the announcements. I hope to see you in a month's time." Seeing that she had already lost everyone's attention, Donna could only conclude tutor time ahead of schedule and dismiss everyone. Packing up her stuff, she soon left the classroom. Clank. Soon as Donna left, I too started packing up my stuff. Today was the last day I stayed in the lock for at least a month. It was finally time to go home. Although I had never met my parents in this world, I would always get messages from them. Be it for normal stuff or nagging. They would always make sure to text me once a day. It was both annoying and heartwarming. Since my parents' death back in my previous world, never had I felt this much love from someone. I couldn't say I disliked this feeling. Feeling a shadow cast over where I was sitting, as I was getting ready to leave the classroom, passing the area where I was sitting, Kevin subtly nodded in my direction, to which I responded in kind. Not a lot changed between us. Although I had talked to Kevin back on the rooftop, we weren't really friends. We would occasionally greet each other whenever we met in the hallway, but that's just about how much our interactions amounted to. Casual acquaintances. That's how I would describe our current relationship. And I liked it that way. No matter how much I liked him as a person, getting too close to him wouldn't do me any good. This was especially so since my interactions with him could lead to me getting swept into his conflicts and potentially changing the plotline. Sometimes I wished I wasn't so stuck up on keeping the plotline consistent. Sigh. Letting out a sigh, finished packing up, I went back to my dorm. This should be enough. Stretching my back, I clapped my hands in satisfaction. Right now my bed was filled with things that I prepared for my month-long trip back home. From clothes to books, I decided to bring them all. Since the trip was going to be that long, I decided to just bring whatever I could bring. With dimensional spaces being a thing, I didn't need to worry about carrying large bags with me. Vroom. Tapping on my bracelet once, everything that was on my bed disappeared. I guess it's about time I Ring. 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 Just as I was about to head out, my phone rang. Looking at the caller ID, I picked up the call. Employer. Yo Small Snake, did you get what I had asked of you last week? Hearing Small Snake's voice on the other side of the phone, holding onto the phone, I double-checked to see if I forgot to bring anything before heading towards the entrance of my room. Yes, I got all the information that you requested. Checking the time on my watch, with the aid of my shoulder, I pressed my phone to my ear and put on my shoes. Alright, perfect, send it to me. Pausing for a slight second, Small Snake hesitated. Small Snake. Noticing something odd about his pause, I frowned and held my phone with my hand. Employer, it's not really my place to say this but. Taking a deep breath, Small Snake said. Your parents' guild isn't doing well. No, in fact, they are in a terrible situation. The Author's POV. Chapter 75, Homecoming, 2. Friday, 9 p.m. Sitting on a bench waiting for the air train to arrive, I absent-mindedly stared at my phone. Looking through the file Small Snake sent me, a strange feeling welled up inside of me. The more I read the files, the stronger the feeling became. Galxicus, information. Guild grade. Bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond. History. Guild was established in 2045, with 10 years to its name. Currently graded as a silver-ranked guild and is under command of current guild leader Ronald Dover D+ ranked hero. Under his guidance, the guild was able to rise from a bronze-graded guild to a silver-graded one. Current situation. Financial distress, debt, 95 million U. Risk of guild relegation, silver-bronze. Internal power struggle, current guild master under heavy scrutiny by board members. More information. Looking through the information and after pondering for a bit, I somehow got the gist of what was happening. After going through my phone, I found out that the 3-year lock enrollment fee was 30 million U. To some, it may be spare change, but to regular people, it was an absurdly astronomical sum. Prior to when I reincarnated, Ren's parents must have taken a 30 million U loan under the guild's name to finance Ren's tuition fee for the lock. After a long and heated debate, Ren's parents must have been able to convince the board to loan them 30 million U as a form of investment. However, after Ren took the test and was judged to be a less than D ranked talent by the lock, the guild executives must have started pressuring Ren's parents into paying back what they owed. As soon as they saw that Ren wasn't talented, they immediately ceased all formalities with their own guild master and took it as an opportunity to take over the guild. The fact that they were withstanding such a heavy burden yet letting me attend the lock at the same time, went to show how much they loved me. Their son. As I thought more about it, another question emerged in my mind. What happened to the original Ren? After thinking long and hard about it, my face became grim. My current hypothesis was that after receiving his talent grading, he fell into a deep depression due to the guilt he felt towards his parents and chose to end his life, allowing me to take over. But this was just a hypothesis I came up with, only the report as a reference. Perhaps after going back home and assessing the situation more carefully, I could find more about the previous Ren. Maybe, there was more to the story than the report told. 9:15 p.m. After having gone through the report a couple of more times, every second that the train wasn't here felt oddly agonizing. It was as if a part of me really wanted it to arrive and quickly send me to my parents' house. But why did I want to meet people that I had never met before so badly? It's not like they were my real parents. Was I perhaps longing for a family that much? I quickly discarded such thought. Although yes, I did want to once again feel the love I felt for my parents back in my previous world, it shouldn't be to the point where I would start longing for it from strangers that I've never met before. Perhaps. Right. What if a part of me still contained the emotions of the previous Ren? What if this longing feeling I was feeling towards my new family was due to the old Ren's influence? Just how much influence did the previous Ren have over me? Clenching my heart, I couldn't help but feel the slow rhythmical palpitations that would increase whenever I dug more onto the previous Ren's family. It hurt. It was the same feeling I felt whenever I thought of my parents back in my previous world. Once I began to think along those lines, it just didn't seem to end. I just started remembering the happy days I spent with my family back in my previous world. When everything wasn't as fucked up as it was now. Their home-cooked meals, their nagging, the fun holidays. All of those memories came flooding down like a dam that had broken into pieces. Phew. Wiping the corner of my eyes that had slightly reddened, I closed my eyes and tried my best to hide the tears that were threatening to fall at any moment. Ah, just what are you doing to me, Ren? And why now? Station, Lock Square, boarding. A crisp and pleasant voice resounded across the train platforms. Boarding the train, I took a quick glance at my surroundings before choosing a seat on the right side of the train. Sitting on a seat next to the window, I took out my earbuds and played some music. After calming down, my thoughts became more clear. Although I don't know what went over me back then, I knew that the previous Ren had something to do with it. Perhaps he had still not fully died and a small part of him remained inside of me. Perhaps he wasn't and it was just my imagination, I wasn't sure, but whatever it was, I hoped it wouldn't influence my future course of action. If by chance I was forced to do something I didn't want to do due to the old Ren's influence, I wouldn't know what I'd do. Station, Lock Square, departing. As I was in deep thought, the voice coming from the train speaker echoed throughout the whole train and the doors slowly closed. Clank. Central District, Lock Square, Northern District, Verrill Square. Voom. Lifting in the air train slowly picked up speed and headed towards my destination, the Northern District. Ashton City had a cumulative population of 50 million people. Being the safest and most centralized area in the human domain, it naturally attracted a lot of people. It was massive. Because of its size, Ashton City was divided into 5 different districts. Northern District, Southern District, Eastern District, Western District, and the Central District. The reason why they were split that way was simple. Because apart from the Northern District, every other district was under the jurisdiction of one of the 4 diamond-graded guilds present in Ashton City. Rank 1. Demon Hunter Southern District. Rank 2. Starlight Guild Central District. Rank 3. Black Hammer Western District. Rank 4. Eclipse of Dawn Eastern District. Although the Union and the central government were the main powers that kept humanity in check, they still allowed the top 4 guilds to take control over certain areas. This way the Union could keep their power centralized and keep guilds satisfied at the same time. And unfortunately for me, the Northern District, where I was headed, was under the jurisdiction of the Union. The annoying bunch. If I remembered correctly, Emma also lived in the Northern District. With her father being the vice director of the Union, as well as the mayor of Ashton City, her house was situated in the Northern District. Fortunately, because each district was humongous, the chances of us meeting weren't high. After the incident in Hallberg, though I didn't talk to her, I would occasionally see her staring in my direction. Back in the lock, she held back her interest because the others were with her, but if by chance met outside of the lock. Yeah, better not think about it. Considering her personality, I wouldn't be surprised if she suddenly started digging into me more. Northern District, Verrill Square, arrival. Exiting the train station, I took out my phone and loaded the GPS app. I had no clue where to go from this point on. This way. Following the GPS, turning right of the station, I followed the red dot on the map and headed towards where my parents' house was located. Night had already fallen and the crescent moon high in the sky was gradually being covered by dark, drifting clouds. The lamps around the crosswalk I was walking brightly lit the areas, and despite it being late, people walking their dogs or having a jog were seen everywhere. Should be this. After walking a further 10 minutes, I stopped in front of a residential compound. After being allowed in by the guards, I headed towards Villa 259. Phew. Taking a deep breath, I looked at the large villa in front of me. Painted in white all over, the villa had 2 balconies and a large garden. Large wooden fences covered the perimeter of the garden, and at the entrance of the villa stood a large wooden door. Looking up at the windows, I could see that the lights were still on, evidently showing that everyone was still awake. It was clear that they were still awake waiting for me. Phew, all right. Hesitantly, I reached for the doorbell of the house. This was it. It was finally time for me to meet my new parents. Ding. Dong. As soon as I pressed the doorbell, on the other side of the door, the sound of rushed footsteps rushing for the door was instantly picked up by my ears. Clank. Opening the door, brilliantly smiling, a beautiful woman with golden hair and blue eyes greeted me at the door. Welcome home, Ren. The Author's POV. Chapter 76, Homecoming, 3. Look at how much you've grown. Squealing in delight from the moment her eyes landed on me, Samantha Dover, my now mother, lunged at me as soon as the door opened. Without having enough time to avoid her, I fell into her embrace. Oak. After a couple of seconds of struggling, I gave up. Oddly enough, I didn't feel repulsed by her hugging. Feeling the warm embrace of my mother, I felt my body became weak and my mind relax. It was an odd yet familiar feeling. It was nice. Let me get a better look at you. After a solid minute, releasing me from her hug, squishing my cheeks with both hands, my mother looked at me with a large smile on her face. Look at how much more handsome you've become. I'm sure every girl in the academy is swooning over your looks. Nodding my head, my mouth twitched. If only that were true. Out of all my stats, only charm refused to increase. What more handsome? Glancing around and feeling the nightly breeze, my mother quickly pulled me into the house. Oh dear, it's better if you come in. We don't want you getting a cold, do we? Yeah. Clank. Closing the door behind me, I entered the house. Taking off my shoes and hanging my coat, I quickly followed her deeper into the house. As I walked, I couldn't help but glance at all of the photos hanging on the wall. There were a wide variety of photos on the walls. Photos of the previous Ren, photos of my now parents, and some group photos of my now parent with people whom I presume were from their guild. They looked especially happy in the photo. I didn't understand why they would want to screw them over like that. Turning left of the corridor, I was soon inside of the living room. As I stepped into the living room, my eyes immediately landed on a certain individual. So that's Ronald Dover, my father. Sitting on the sofa looking through some papers, Ronald Dover, my now father, glanced in my direction. Nodding in my direction, he said, "Welcome back." Ah, yes. Dumbly staring at Ronald, my father, those were the words that came out of my mouth. Aside from my eyes, he was a spitting image of the current me. His facial features were identical to mine, and coupled with his jet black hair, he looked like an older version of me. However, if I had to point out the difference between us, it'd be the fact that his face lacked the childish immature nature that I had. His demeanor was a stark contrast from mine, as he looked extremely solemn and serious. "Oh, come on, Ren, don't be shy. Sit next to me." Sitting next to my father, my mother quickly urged me to sit next to her. After hesitating for a split second, under her pressuring stare, I could only obediently sit next to her. After I sat down, tugging her husband's sleeves to make sure he was paying attention, she looked at me and said, "So, tell us how your first semester at your academy was." Pausing for a second to gather my thoughts, I stared at both of them and started speaking. Well, how do I start? And so I started recounting what had happened to me during my academic stay in the lock. I intentionally left out things such as going to the black market and taking the seed of limit and stuff. When the conversation shifted towards the Hallberg incident, well, let's just say things didn't end well, as my mom cursed a lot. I remember her texting me a lot during that time. Fortunately, I reassured her that I was fine. If not, I wouldn't be surprised if she suddenly packed up her stuff and went to Hallberg. As I talked, I was slightly uncomfortable at first, but the more I talked, the more at ease I felt. It felt as if this was one of the many talks I had with them over the years. It felt strangely nostalgic and familiar, which was a very odd feeling. As I was talking, from what I observed, my now father, Ronald Dover, although he looked cold on the exterior, he was quite warm. He wasn't a man of many words like my mother, but from time to time he would occasionally join the conversation to add his input. Although it didn't look like much, his little inputs would always keep the conversation going, and the room was soon enveloped in a harmonious atmosphere. This atmosphere. This warmth. Pita. Feeling hot tears streaming down my cheeks, I froze for a second before quickly wiping them away from my face. Sorry. I don't know what got over me. Seeing me cry, my mom immediately lunged in my direction and took me in her embrace. "I know you've been through a lot. Here, you can cry in your mama's arms. Feeling myself in her warm arms, for a split second my mind blanked. Soon after, as if a dam had broke, tears burst down from my cheeks. Sent into a different world where everything was different, and having spent the last 2 months by myself, with no one to rely on but myself, her warm words and embrace caused hidden feelings that were within me to surge. My father soon also joined the hug, and I soon found myself buried beneath the both of them. "All right, stop, I'm fine now." After a couple of minutes, after I calmed down, I was able to free myself from their embrace. Fixing my clothes, which were now a mess, I tried to switch the topic. "So that's all for what happened. How's the guild doing?" Brightly smiling, making eye contact with her husband for a second, my mother said, "Everything is perfect. Apart from the fact that we have to put in some extra hours here and there, everything is going well." Looking at them for a second, I smiled and leaned back on the sofa. "Is that so? I'm glad you're doing fine then." Liars. I already knew everything. A part of me felt a little bitter at the fact that they still hid their troubles from me, but I sort of understood where they were coming from. They didn't want their problems to affect me, and rightfully so. Why would they want their child who was studying at the best academy in the human domain to feel pressured? All they wanted was for their son to study happily while they support him from the back. Disrupting our conversation was the sound of small footsteps. Gingerly walking into the living room, a small girl wearing oversized pajamas and a large teddy bear on her right hand drowsily rubbed her little eyes. She had smooth black hair that fell all the way to her tummy, and her eyes that were a similar shade of blue to my eyes hazily looked at her teddy in her arms. Her rosy plump cheeks that had a small blush to them made anyone who was near her want to squeeze them tightly. Even I, as I watched her enter the room, had an urge to squeeze those cheeks. Looking up in my direction, tilting her little head, the young girl said, "Big booter." Freezing on the spot. My eyes stared at the young girl that had entered the room. "So that's my sister Nola." Looking at the small girl that I had just entered the room, I instantly realized that she was supposed to be my 2-year-old sister. Nola. Booter. Calling for me for a second time, Nola extended her arms in my direction. "How cute." Smiling at Nola, my mother looked at Nola before looking back in my direction. "Nola tried her best to stay awake just to wait for you." Picking up Nola, my mother walked in my direction and handed her to me. After hesitating for a second, supporting her from her little butt, I held Nola in my arms. Hooking her little arms around my neck, Nola's face brightened up as she closed her eyes and immediately fell asleep. Feeling her breathing even on my neck, I could only stand rooted on the spot. I didn't move because I was afraid of waking her up. My eyes darted towards my parents asking for help, but I was only met with their smiling faces. What was I supposed to do now? I was a loner back in my previous world. I never interacted with kids, nor did I have any. I had no idea what I was supposed to do. But strangely, I didn't dislike this feeling. As I held Nola in my arms, a strange protective feeling welled inside of me. It felt as if nothing would stop me from protecting this child in my arms. Taking a better look at Nola, who was innocently sleeping in my arms, I realized that even without the old Ren's emotions affecting me, I would do anything to protect her. After holding Nola for 5 more minutes, my mom stood up and took back Nola from my arms. "All right, give Nola back to me. You must be tired, go to sleep." Soon she sent me to my room, to which I happily agreed as I was indeed feeling tired. Walking upstairs, I entered what seemed to be my room. It was a decently sized room that was similar in size to my room in the lock. However, compared to the lackluster decorations back in the lock, this room was filled with posters and magazines as well as other decorations. Glancing around the room, I sat on the bed in the corner of the room and took a deep breath. Although it was my first time here, it did not feel unfamiliar. It was a strange feeling. It was a different feeling from when I was back in the lock. I felt more at peace here. It seemed that this body remembered this place well. Standing up and looking through the shelves of the room, I saw a picture of the previous Ren with his parents. Taking the photo frame to get a better look at the image, I saw him holding a bouquet of flowers smiling alongside his parents in front of the academy. Pang. However, as soon as I held onto that picture, I felt my heart sting for a split second. Flinching slightly, I almost dropped the frame on the ground. Frowning, I took a better look at the picture. And there I saw it. No. I could feel it. Beneath Ren's smile in the photo hid deep sadness and anguish. Just what happened to you? What caused you to be that way? Smack. Get yourself together. There was no point in investigating what had happened to the previous Ren now. I believed that by the end of the month I would be able to discover what had happened to Ren and resolve his regrets. Perhaps this was the only way his emotions would leave my body and I would finally have this body to myself. I wasn't really sure, but he at least deserved that much. For having given me a second chance as well as given me a happy and warm family, resolving his regrets was something I needed to do. Staring at the white ceiling of the room, I bitterly smiled as I thought back of what I told myself moments before I entered the house. During that time, I had repeatedly told myself not to get overly attached to my parents in this world. I told myself that there was no point in getting attached to some random strangers that I had never met before. But who was I kidding? Remembering Nola's tender cheek resting on my shoulder just moments before, as well as my parents' warm faces as they consoled me, I already knew it was already too late for me to not get attached. Pumph. Slumping on the white mattress, I thought to myself. This feeling, it isn't so bad. The Author's POV. Chapter 77, Homecoming, 4. After waking up, I headed downstairs to the kitchen. The first thing I saw as soon as I entered the kitchen was a small note left on the table. Picking it up, I read through the contents. Ren, if you're reading this, your mom and dad have already gone to work. Once you wake up, bring Nola to the park outside and enjoy your weekend. I've already sent you some money to your account for when you go out. At around 12 p.m. you should come down to the guild with Nola. After we are done sorting out some stuff we will bring you guys to lunch. See you soon. Love Mom and Dad. They're already at work, huh? I guess with everything that was going on in the guild, it wasn't strange for them to work on weekends too. Neatly folding the small note, I headed towards the dining table where warm dishes covered in a thin plastic film were already prepared. As I sat on the table, lifting the plastic film, the fragrance of the bacon and the eggs on the plate instantly invaded my nostrils. Without skipping a beat, I devoured everything that was on the plate. Delicious. After eating my fill, patting my now bloated belly, I checked the time on my watch. 6:45 a.m. It was still very early in the morning, and looking outside the window I could see the sun slowly brightening up the surroundings. Since I had nothing to do, I decided to train for a couple of hours before waking Nola up and bringing her to the park. Clank. Sliding the glass doors that led to the garden, the morning breeze instantly cooled my body. Walking in the garden, feeling the lush green grass tingling at my naked feet, I took a deep breath and took out my sword from my dimensional space. Foo. Releasing a long breath, a white glow slowly started emanating from my body. Following which, with my sword, I drew 3 circles in the air. Voom. As I drew the circles, after each full circulation, a translucent ring wobbled in the air. After the first ring formed, closing my eyes I drew a second and a third. Voom. Right after the third ring formed, I once again closed my eyes and concentrated my mind. As I did, the circles slowly started revolving around my body. Swoosh. Pointing towards my right side, one of the rings flew in the direction of where I pointed. With my left hand, I pointed upwards and another ring flew upwards. In the direction of where I pointed. Like that, for half an hour, I continuously moved the rings around me. Swoosh. 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 After 2 minutes, whenever a ring would dissipate in the air, I would quickly create a new one and continue with what I was doing. After the Hallberg incident, I didn't stop training. In fact, as a way to get my mind off of things, I trained even harder than before. And because of that, my second sword art, Ring of Vindication, reached the minor realm of mastery. With the sword art reaching the minor realm of mastery, I could now freely control the rings I created. If I wanted to, I could make them revolve around me for as long as the ring could last. Even better, the rings could now withstand the full impact of G-ranked individuals without breaking. Even F ranks would now have a hard time breaking the rings that I made, creating a perfect defense system. As far as rings went, as of right now I could comfortably control 3. I could do 4, but that would strain my head too much due to my lack of control over my mana. In the future, the more I mastered this technique, the more rings I could control. Moreover, the more I mastered the technique, the better the rings would get with gravitational pull and elemental discharge being effects I could add to the rings. This was a massive improvement in my strength as now I wouldn't have to worry about needing to waste time to use the Keiki style. With the rings protecting me, I could quickly control them to protect me whenever I was readying myself to execute a movement from my main sword art. Hoom. 9 a.m. As white steam dissipated from my body, checking the time, I stretched my back and yawned. I guess it's about time to wake up Nola. I had been training non-stop for about 2 hours. Looking at my watch and seeing the time, I knew it was about time to wake up Nola. Heading back into the house, I first took a quick shower before entering Nola's room. Wouldn't want to make Nola smell my sweat. Creak. Opening the door of Nola's room, I tiptoed towards her cradle. Looking at her little body sleeping soundly with her teddy in her arms, I whispered lightly. "Hey Nola, it's time to wake up." After whispering a couple of more times to try to wake her up, poking her cheeks a couple of times, Nola's eyelids slowly opened. Brother. Yes, it's Big Brother Ren. Smiling, I picked her up from her cradle and brought her out of her room. Still groggy from having just woken up, Nola leaned on my shoulder and stared at the ground. Smiling, I brought her to the kitchen. Since I had to bring her to the park, I gave her a cup of milk for breakfast before dressing her up. After styling Nola's hair into 2 ponytails, I brought her towards the entrance of the house. "I'm done." "That's great." Putting on her shoes, wearing a one-piece dress decorated with flower patterns, Nola took my hand and followed me out of the house. "All right, let's go." Clank. Closing the door behind me, we soon left for the park. Arriving at the park, Nola's eyes immediately started shining with excitement. Looking at the park, I couldn't help but be impressed by how beautiful it was. As the sun brightly lit the park, in the middle of it was a large lake where swans and ducks happily swam on the surface of the water. Near the lake, a bunch of children were happily playing in the playground with their friends and parents. Whizzing through the air, the children happily screamed as their parents pushed them from behind. Glancing at Nola, whose eyes were glued on the playground, I bitterly shook my head and headed in that direction. The playground had many different things that children could play with. It had multiple swings, a large slide, and a castle which seemed to be the most popular attraction in the playground. Near the playground, spread out over the vibrant green grass, sitting on large covers, families could be seen basking under the sun and happily chatting with each other. "Wow, is that you, Ren?" As I was walking towards the playground with Nola, I suddenly heard someone call my name. Turning my head in the direction of where the sound came from, I soon spotted 2 individuals heading in my direction. On the left, a guy with dark hair and green eyes smiled as he looked in my direction. On his ears were a couple of earrings, and coupled with his white designer t-shirt and tight black pants, I could immediately tell that whoever he was, he came from a relatively prominent family. "Haha, it is you. How long has it been?" Seeing me turn around and confirming that I was indeed the person he was looking for, the youth's smile deepened. Glancing next to him, the long-haired youth pointed towards me as he nudged his friend with his elbow. "Get a hold of this, Greg, it's Ren." Indifferently nodding, wearing long jeans, a red sweater, and a black cap, a relatively muscular and tall individual slowly walked in my direction. "Who?" Staring at the 2 individuals making their way towards my direction, tilting my head to the side, I frowned. Who were they? Were they perhaps the old Ren's friends? Judging from how friendly they being, I assumed they were, but why did my heart feel a slight sense of repulsion and disgust? Just as I was pondering over the feeling I was having in my heart, hooking his arm around my neck, the long-haired youth happily said, "How are you doing?" "I'm doing." Right before I could finish my sentence, exerting the strength equivalent to a less than G-ranked individual, the long-haired youth whispered in my ear. "Listen carefully, little shit. Didn't I tell you before to never appear in this area again?" Taken aback by his sudden change in attitude, I was left speechless for a second. "What? Don't tell me you forgot." Staring at my reaction and misunderstanding it for something else, the long-haired youth strengthened his grip on my neck before saying, "Well, it looks like we might have to teach you a lesson." Looking at Nola, who was holding my hand, I let out a long breath before saying, "Foo, wait, not here." Raising his brow, the long-haired youth smirked and mockingly said, "What makes you think you can decide what we do?" Glaring at him, I looked at Nola and reminded them that I wasn't alone. "Can't you see I'm with my little sister?" Noticing my sister, clicking his tongue, the long-haired youth removed his hand from my neck before smirking. "I see, you don't want to look bad in front of your sister, right? We sure hope nothing happens to her, ha ha ha." Ignoring his last words, bending down towards Nola, I looked at her in the eyes before saying, "Nola, can you do me a favor?" Curiously looking at the two people that had come, Nola looked back at me and nodded her head. Seeing her nod her little head, I smiled and took out my phone. Pointing towards a nearby bench, I said, "Here, take my phone and go sit on that bench over there." Looking at the phone, Nola shook her head. "Nana wants to be with Big Bwader. How about this, after I come back I will buy you whatever ice cream or candy you want." "Really?" "Yes." Nodding her head enthusiastically, Nola ran to the bench I previously pointed at and sat down. Seeing how enthusiastic and obedient she became as soon as I bribed her, I couldn't help but bitterly smile. Kids were sure easy. "All right, let's go." After making sure Nola was fine, I looked at my two friends and smiled. He, it's been a while since we haven't seen each other. Don't worry, for the sake of your sister we will make this short. Once again hooking his arm around my neck, the black-haired youth nudged his friend, Greg, to follow him. Walking towards a more secluded area of the park, whilst still making sure that Nola was in my sights, the smile on my face slowly faded away. It's been a while since I had been this pissed. To think I was now being picked on by a bunch of extras that didn't even appear in the story. It was understandable if it was the lock, but this wasn't. I didn't need to hide my strength here. Especially if it was against some extras that never appeared in the story. In fact, I was tired of remaining passive. If this was the lock, things may have been different, but now. Vroom. KHH, what? How? Right after making sure no one was looking, releasing my F-ranked pressure, both individuals felt a massive pressure envelop them. Bam. Bam. Kuka. Heavily punching them both in the stomach, kneeling down, a green acidic substance escaped from both of their mouths as their faces became white as paper. The only reason they even made it this far was because I let them. Judging from how they knew me, this was a good chance for me to find more about what the old Wren's life used to be like. However, since they pissed me off, it was about time I let them know their place. Cracking my neck, I bent down and looked at them in the eyes. Let's make this quick. The Author's POV. Chapter 78, Galxicus, 1. I'm done, Nola, come here. Smiling, I waved at Nola in the distance and urged her to come to me. Nodding her little head, putting the phone away, Nola ran in my direction. Up. Lifting her into my arms, I smiled and pointed towards the playground in the distance. Let's go play. Yes. Walking towards the playground, although I was smiling, that was merely a facade I put on since Nola was with me. My mind was in a current state of turmoil. After politely conversing with the two individuals, I found out a few things. First off, the long-haired guy's name was Simon Perk and his father was a relatively influential person inside of a bronze-graded guild. The guy next to him was called Greg Topaz and he was his childhood friend as well as bodyguard. The reason why they knew me was because the old Wren and they used to attend the same middle school. Fermin Middle School. One of the top middle schools in the Northern District. However, from what I've uncovered from my talk, the previous Rendover was a social outcast. It wasn't like this before, but after a series of events, he became an outcast. This probably happened right after he got accepted in the lock. Although I wasn't able to get a clear picture of what had happened since they weren't part of Wren's class, I was able to deduce that an important event had happened in Fermin Middle School. Which was enough of a start for me, I at least had a direction to focus on now. Bwader. As I was busy pondering over the old Wren's matters, feeling a light tug on my pants, I saw Nola's droopy eyes staring at my shoes. Are you tired already? Nodding her head, Nola extended her hands in my direction. 11:20 a.m. It should be time anyways. Checking the time, I picked Nola from the ground and left the park. It was about time I headed to the guild. I wonder what's it like being in a guild. It should be this one. Arriving in front of a large skyscraper that was about 200 meters in height, and had about 80 floors, I brought Nola inside of the building with me. From what I had been told by my parents, the whole building was used as the base for their guild Galxicus. Although they didn't own the building, they managed to rent it out for a reasonable monthly price. Arriving in front of the elevators at the entrance of the building, I pressed the button and called for one. As I waited for the elevator to arrive, I took a quick glance at my surroundings. Surrounded by glass, the interior of the bottom floor was brightly lit by the sun in the sky. White marble floor covered the entire pavement, and people moving to and fro inside of the building was a constant sight. It looked extremely busy. Ding! Entering the elevator and pressing on the 25th floor button, the elevator doors closed and a slight pushing sensation appeared beneath my feet. Ding! In a matter of seconds, the elevator reached the 25th floor, and the doors slid sideways. Clank! Wow! As soon as the elevator doors opened, a whole different world appeared before my eyes. The 25th floor looked like a luxurious office space. The floor was extremely large, with a space that could accumulate over hundreds of people at a time. The area I was currently in was the main reception area of the guild. The higher floors were office spaces for administrative management, and the lower floors were for heroes as they provided training facilities and other things heroes required, like a potion station and supply replenishment areas. The ground was covered in a red carpet, and large TV screens were installed in the corner of the space with constant updates on the news and which dungeons were available for raids. People wearing combat suits followed by people wearing formal ones appeared everywhere. Most likely, they were the members of the guild being followed by their managers. Looking at the scenery before me, I couldn't help but be amazed. So this was my parents' guild, Galxicus. Ren. Snapping me out of my reverie was the cheerful sound of my mom's voice. Ren, you're just in T-dash. However, freezing mid-sentence, my mother's eyes landed on Nola, who was standing next to me. The more she looked, the grimmer her face became. Ren. Glancing back at me, her eyes became cold, and her previous cheerful demeanor disappeared. Taken aback by her sudden shift in attitude, I didn't know what to do as cold sweat suddenly appeared on my back. What happened? And why does it look as if a demon had suddenly appeared behind my mother? Something wasn't right. What's wrong? Are you telling me that you can't tell what you've done wrong? What I did wrong? Frowning, I recalled everything that had happened today. Apart from taking Nola to the park and beating a couple of kids, I don't think there was anything to warrant her reaction. Why was she so angry? Sigh. Seeing how clueless I was, pointing towards Nola, her tone raised a few pitches. Just look at the state Nola is in. Nola. Glancing at Nola in confusion, I didn't see anything wrong with her. Apart from the fact that both her pockets were filled with candy and she was holding an ice cream cone in each hand, I didn't see anything strange. Oh my God. What kind of son did I raise? Helplessly shaking her head, my mom went to Nola, and apart from one ice cream, she immediately took everything from her. Nola did try to protest, but under our mother's seriousness, she could only turn her head in my direction, to which I could only avoid and pretend to feign ignorance. I'm sorry. After putting away all of the candy, Samantha, my mother, took Nola by her hand and urged me to follow her. All right, forget it. Follow me up to meet your dad. Okay. Just as I was about to follow my mother up, the whole floor became quiet before suddenly everyone started panicking. He's here. Everyone get ready. Stopping whatever they were doing, crowding towards the elevator, a bunch of guild members bowed down. Clank. As the elevator doors opened, exiting them was the vice-guild leader of the Galxicus Guild. Martin Lorwick. His shoulder-length hair was curved up slightly, and he had a well-trimmed black beard that nicely fitted around his jaw. The solemnity given off by his extraordinary appearance was similar to that of my father, as every step he would take caused all the guild members near him to shake in their boots. Hugh. Looking around the room with his snake-like eyes, the vice-guild master of the Galxicus Guild, Martin Lorwick, murmured quietly. This guild is going to the shitters. His voice, which was deep, was loud enough for most people around him to hear. With a moderate arrogance and a lethargic attitude, Martin Lorwick pushed back the people flocking in his direction. Staring at him in the distance, my eyes narrowed into slits as I closely scrutinized him. According to the reports that Small Snake sent me, he was the man leading the inner conflicts within the guild. He was a less than D-ranked hero, just slightly weaker than my father, and was selected by the guild investors to become the vice director of the guild. With the aid of the board of directors, he managed to convince them into overthrowing the current guild leader. My father. As I closely scrutinized Martin, another wave of murmurs engulfed the entire floor as a youth walked out from behind him. The youth was wearing a white-colored, long-sleeved, loosely fit t-shirt with a strange insignia sewn on the back of it. His black obsidian eyes, which were brighter than ordinary people's, had hints of wisdom hidden deep within them. The youth's face was quite handsome and outstanding, with his skin being smooth without any imperfections. His long black-colored hair dangled to his shoulders, and his demeanor carried hints of arrogance and pride. As he followed Martin from behind, with his back straight, he would look down on everyone present in the room, almost as if he owned the place. As Martin and the youth were walking, Martin's eyes suddenly drifted towards the other end of the hall where 3 individuals stood. A smirk soon emerged on his face. "Follow me, Alex." Plowing through the crowd of people, Martin and the youth named Alex soon stopped in front of me and my mother. Looking at my mother, Martin politely smiled and said, "It's a pleasure seeing you here, Samantha." Frowning, a trace of disgust appeared on my mother's face before it quickly disappeared as fast as it came. Smiling politely, she greeted him back. "Hello, Martin. It's been a long time since we've spoken to each other like." Soon they started conversing with each other. However, if someone wasn't paying close attention to their conversation, one wouldn't be able to notice all the hidden meanings behind each other's words. Ahaha, my husband indeed worked very hard to build the guild from the ground up. But of course, that was largely due to how much I was helping him. As my mom was conversing with Martin, the youth behind him walked up to me. Seizing me up, a smirk soon appeared on his face. "Are you the talentless waste who was able to attend to the lock due to how their father stole from his own guild to pay for his son's tuition?" The moment I saw him, I just knew. I knew things were going to be like this. Smiling politely, I said, "If you're talking about the D-ranked talent student attending the lock, that would indeed be me. I just don't understand how someone like you could even manage to end dash." Just as Alex was about to finish his sentence, audible murmurs resounded the floor as the people around us started separating. Soon, with a presence that was even more domineering to that of Martin, my father arrived. "Guildmaster. Guildmaster. Morning, Guildmaster." Furrowing his brows, Martin quickly put on a big smile as he looked at Ronald. "Ah, Guildmaster, I was just catching up with Samantha." Nodding his head towards Martin, Ronald ignored him and looked at my mother. Seeing that everything was all right, he glanced in my direction. "This Ren." Noticing my dad looking at me, Martin's eyes shined for a split second before he immediately arrived beside me and patted me on the shoulder. "Haha, how long has it been since I saw you? By the way, have you it seems like they've already met. Let me introduce him to you." Pointing towards Alex that was standing in front of me, Martin's tone carried hints of pride as he spoke. "This here is Alex Cloudburn. He is currently attending Nord Academy, the best academy in the Northern District, and is a B-ranked talent I picked up." Whilst looking at my father, Martin's eyes paused slightly on me before emphasizing the B-ranked talent part when he was introducing Alex. Looking at Alex, who didn't shy away from my father's eyes, my dad nodded his head and said, "That's indeed very good talent you have picked up." Smirking, Martin raised his hands in the air as the tone of his voice increased a few pitches. "Good. Just good. We are talking about a B-ranked talent here, Ronald." Shaking his head in disappointment, Martin continued, "I know your son enrolled in the lock, but with his talent, he's in a completely different world compared to Alex." Without giving a chance for my father to speak, glancing around him, in a voice that was audible enough for everyone to hear, Martin looked at my father and said, "Since you seem to be more impressed by your son more than Alex, how about we let our 2 kids spar? You know, just to show our members how much the prospects we've chosen have improved." Glancing around, I could instantly see the momentum of the conversation falling in Martin's direction. By not giving a chance for my father to speak, Martin carried the conversation to the point where it suddenly became a duel between me and Alex. His goal was obvious. If my father refused, his reputation would fall as it would make him seem like a coward. And if he accepted and I lost miserably, his reputation would also take a hit. Moreover, knowing the previous Ren, Martin judged that his plan was foolproof, hence why he acted fast. However, he miscalculated something. I done dash. After a long silence, just as my father was about to refuse Martin's provocation, tugging his clothes, I firmly looked at him in the eyes and said, "Dad, accept. Ren do dash." Raising his hand to stop my mother from protesting, staring at me for a solid minute, my dad looked back at Martin for a couple of seconds before nodding. "Okay, we accept." "Ha ha ha ha, great, let's meet in the arena in half an hour time." Laughing out loud, Martin took one last glance at us before waving and leaving with Alex. Right after Martin left, the crowd around us dispersed, leaving behind me and my family. Turning his attention towards me, Ronald Dover, my father, solemnly asked, "Are you sure?" Smiling, I nodded my head. Never been more sure. The Author's POV. Chapter 79, Galxicus, 2. Descending down the elevator. I quickly headed towards where the changing rooms were located. Suddenly, just as I was about to enter the changing room, an official guild member wearing a black suit stopped me. Frowning, pointing towards my name tag, I said in a somewhat disgruntled voice. I'm the one participating in the fight, can't you see? Haha, it's not that. If you want to get changed you must head to another room. Pointing to my right, the man pointed at a pathway next to the main entrance. Oh, thank you. Thanking the man, I walked in the direction he pointed at and soon arrived at my assigned waiting room. Waiting room 3. Entering the changing room, I walked in and sat down on a random seat. Phew. Letting out a long breath, I prepared my mind for what was to come. From what I've gathered, my opponent, Alex Cloudburn, was a spear user whose rank was F- or rank lower than mine. Meaning that I was stronger than him. At least stats-wise. Coming into this match, I decided that apart from using the Keiki style, I would go all out. Meaning that I was about to expose my rank. After thinking for a bit, I decided that pretending to be weak all the time wasn't something that would benefit me. At least not when I wasn't in the lock. There was no longer a need for me to stop myself from exposing a part of my abilities. It was fine to expose some of it. Not all of it, but some of it. And that's exactly what I was planning. Recalling Alex's arrogant face as he looked at me in disgust, I was sure I wasn't going to pull any punches in our fight today. I made up my mind to absolutely destroy and humiliate him in front of everyone present. I needed to destroy Martin's rising momentum and give my father some breathing space. And the only way to achieve this was through thoroughly beating the crap out of Alex. Beat him to the point where he would forever remember the humiliation. Fortunately for him, before the match was decided, I had told my dad to block people from taking videos or photos of the match, saving him from future humiliations. When I asked my dad for this request, he initially thought that it was because I was afraid of it spreading on the web, but my reason couldn't be any more different. I wanted to leave a bit of leeway for myself in case I would be forced to use the Keiki style to win. If videos of our fight were to be exposed to the world to see, though unlikely, there was bound to be someone out there who would be able to recognize what sword art I practiced. Chances were that once exposed, my family would definitely be put in danger. Although I wasn't worried to the point I felt that I would need to use the Keiki style for my current spar, I just wanted to reduce any chances of this coming back to bite me in the future. Galxicus Stadium. The guild's official arena was designed to be a more modern version of the Colosseum. The central arena was split into 3 squared platforms, while the stand started 10 meters above the platforms and could house more than 2,000 people. The design was extremely popular amongst the guild members as there would always be fights happening in the arena. Large TV screens stood at the top of the stadium giving a clear picture of what was happening in the arenas for the spectators to see. Because the screens were controlled by the guild master, Ronald Dover, there was no need for him to worry about the footage being leaked. 10 minutes before the start of a duel, the guest seats were packed full of people. Because of the earlier warning by the guild master, photos and videos were prohibited from being taken during the match. Some assumed that it was because he didn't want videos of his son losing miserably to Alex to spread, whilst others thought it was because he didn't want people to find out about the internal struggles happening within the guild. Either way, no one was really against the idea of not being able to take photos or videos since they weren't expecting a decent match to begin with. Can Ren do it? Watching the battle arena from above, inside of a glass cube, a few individuals sat on large red sofas. Worriedly glancing towards the arena, Samantha Dover glanced at her husband and squeezed his hand tightly. I believe in him. Nodding his head, Ronald Dover too looked at the arena. However, even though he didn't show outwardly, he too was extremely nervous. This fact was quickly picked up by his wife who felt the grip on her hand tighten. Recalling his meeting with Alex 30 minutes ago, Ronald couldn't help but worry a bit. This is going to be a tough match for Ren. Humph. Sitting a few rows behind Ronald, Martin arrogantly looked at the arena below him as he sipped on some wine. Twirling the wine cup in his hands, Martin looked at Ronald before slowly saying, I hope your son can last long enough for this to actually be considered a match. Ignoring Martin's provocations, Ronald kept his eyes on the arena, causing Martin to clench his teeth in anger. Just you wait, you bastard, just you wait until Alex absolutely destroys your son in front of the whole guild. I want to see if you can ignore me then. It's starting. Tisk. Seeing the lights around the stadium turn off, Martin crossed his arms and leaned against the back of the seat. From the way he was smiling, it was obvious that he was confident in Alex's chances of winning. The informal duel between the Vice Guild Master and Guild Master was starting. Standing in the middle of the arena, a middle-aged man equipped with a headset and a microphone stared at the audience with a big smile on his face. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a duel between Vice Guild Master Representative Alex Cloudberm and the Guild Master Representative as well as son, Rendover." Pausing slightly, to keep the crowd in suspense, the host said, "How will Rendover, who was rated as AD ranked talent, overcome Alex Cloudberm, who was listed as AB ranked talent? Isn't the result already obvious?" Looking at the crowd, the host put on a confused expression as he said the last bit. However, his expression soon changed as he spoke with more enthusiasm. "However, don't lose me just yet, crowd. Did you know that Rendover over here is also a student at the Lock? Yes, the most prestigious academy that there is." With all the information he had, the host tried his best to hype up the match as much as he could. And this was evidently achieved as the cheers around the stadium intensified. Soon, a translucent blue barrier covered the whole arena. The blue film, which was created out of mana, was made to prevent the shockwaves from the fights to leak out. This way, if things got out of hand, the spectators wouldn't be affected. "Oh, I see Big Waiter." Pointing towards the arena, Nola couldn't help but shout as soon as she saw Ren's figure slowly walking into the arena. "Come Nola, cheer for your brother." Nervously staring at Ren, who walking out from the right passageway, Samantha Dover held Nola tightly in her arms and nervously bit her lips. "Please be safe. Are you ready?" "Yes." Led by the staff, I walked up to the main arena stage. As soon as my foot stepped into the arena, the rumbustious cheers coming from the crowd instantly drowned out any other sound. Why? Just as I was about to get adjusted to the cheers, an even more boisterous round of cheers engulfed the entire arena, almost turning me deaf. Entering the arena after me, Alex waved at the crowd as he posed with his spear in his hand. His every pose and action would arouse more cheers and claps from the crowd. Ignoring him, I decided to look around me. First, I took a good look around the arena. A translucent mana barrier surrounded the arena with thousands of spectators looking down. On a small podium next to the arena, a referee looked at his watch as he waited for me and Alex to get into positions. The more I took notice of my surroundings, the more I felt this indescribable pressure and excitement overwhelmed me. It somehow filled me with energy. While I was shaking from this strange sensation, Alex walked up from the other side. Arriving in front of his designated location, he looked at me and said, "You got lucky. With a puny talent like yours, you actually managed to enroll at the Lock while I had to settle for the second best option. How is it that someone of your caliber can enter the academy and I can't?" Without saying a word, I looked at him straight into the eyes. Although his words had some truth to them, right now he was merely trying to shake my mentality. This was a common practice used when opponents faced each other in duels. Regardless of who your opponent was, a key component in increasing your chances of winning was to get into your opponent's heads. If you managed to enter their heads, the chances of you losing drastically reduced. A person's mentality was one of the most important things fighters needed to take into consideration before fighting. A person with a weak mentality would find it much harder to win compared to someone who remained rational throughout the whole fight. Counting down. 3. Glancing between me and Alex a couple of times, the host started counting down. Shing, shing, scraping his spear on the ground, Alex smirked in my direction. 2. Igniting his mana, a red hue slowly started coating around Alex's body and his spear. In contrast, a white glow enveloped me. 1. Leaning forward, Alex shifted his center of gravity towards his right foot that had dug deep into the ground. Currently, the distance that separated me and Alex was about 10 meters. It was a distance Alex could close in just a few seconds. This meant that as soon as the match started, I had 3 seconds to either defend or counterattack whatever he was planning on doing. Gripping onto my sword, a trace of a smile appeared on my lips. Fortunately, I had a plan. I already knew what to do. Start. The Author's POV. Chapter 80, Galxicus, 3. Start. Boom. As soon as the referee announced the start of the match, like a missile, Alex shot in my direction. A shockwave resounded across the arena as his figure disappeared from where he was standing. Dash. Moments before Alex shot in my direction, tensing my calves I moved backward and quickly drew a circle in the air. Swoosh. Just as the tip of Alex's spear was about to reach me, motioning with my fingers upwards, the ring I created moved right in front of the spear. Clank. Caught off guard, Alex's arms, which were still holding onto the spear tightly, flung in the air as the spear clashed against the ring, disrupting its momentum. His body became wide open. Capitalizing on the opening, without skipping a beat, using the scabbard of the sword I hit him in the face, and the sound of something breaking resounded across the arena. Kacha. Kawawa. Taking 10 steps back, Alex opened his eyes wide open as his hands held onto his nose. Drip. Drip. Soon red droplets fell onto the pavement of the arena. Taking a moment to process what had happened, Alex looked at the ground for a moment before screaming with bloodshot eyes. How dare you? Voom. Soon, a thick pressure started emanating from his body, surrounding the whole arena. Noticing the changes happening around me, I rubbed my chin and stared at Alex. The red hue surrounding his body had become thicker and stronger than before. He was finally starting to take me seriously. Licking my lips lightly, raising my hand, I provocatively beckoned at him. Come. In the stands, watching the spectacle unfold before their eyes, Ronald and Samantha Dover were pleasantly surprised by their son's performance. Although the match had only just started, from the way things were going, Ren seemed to be having the upper hand. Oh my God, since when did Ren become so strong? Covering her mouth to hide her shock, Samantha looked at her husband, who, although seemed to have had no significant change in expression, was too shocked as his hands shook as soon as Ren hit Alex in the face. He's definitely become stronger. Humph, he just got lucky. Martin, who was a few rows behind them, snorted. However, although he said that, his face was grim. Sitting up on his chair, his eyes remained glued to the arena. Alex must have underestimated his opponent. There's no way such mistake would happen again. He just couldn't believe that Alex, a talent that he had spent countless resources on to convince him to join him, was currently losing Ren. Someone evaluated as A less than D ranked talent couldn't possibly beat Alex, who was evaluated at B rank. It just wasn't possible. And true to his predictions, the fight began to lean in Alex's direction as soon as he released his full power. From then on, Alex was on the attack, whilst Ren was on the defense. Secretly sighing in relief, Martin leaned back on his chair and looked at Ronald. See, what did I tell you, he was just lucky. Clank. 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 Alex's spearmanship was truly domineering and vicious. With each swing, he would directly aim for my heart and head, resulting in me having to switch focus so that I could constantly defend myself from his attacks. Using the spear's long reach, he constantly cut, smacked, and stabbed in my direction. To the spectators, rather than a duel, this was more like Alex viciously attacking me with everything he got. Swoosh. Swoosh. Circling the rings around me, I would constantly move them towards where Alex was attacking, repeatedly blocking his every attack. Clank. Clank. Soon, the sounds of Alex's spear clashing against my rings repeatedly reverberated across the arena. The crowd's booing followed suit. Do something. Fight back. This is so boring. As if everything went from one ear to the other, I kept defending. Although it looked like I was struggling, I really wasn't. Since I decided to hide my main sword art, I decided to use this time to get familiar with my second sword art. Ring of Vindication. And what better way than through real combat? Stop hiding like a rat and fight, you pussy. Annoyed, noticing that things were currently going nowhere, Alex screamed as he fiercely stabbed the spear in my direction. Just do something. Damn it. Clank. Clank. As Alex hacked with more power and with greater speeds, I continuously matched his tempo and redirected the rings around me accordingly. Whenever I noticed that a ring was about to break, I would instantly create a new one. This endless cycle repeated a couple of times before Alex stopped attacking. Hugh. Taking a deep breath, Alex stopped whatever he was doing and clenched his teeth hard. What's wrong? Tired already? Seeing Alex distancing himself from me, I immediately taunted. However, this time, he ignored me. Licking his dried lips, Alex's grip on his spear increased. He was trying his best to calm himself down and come up with an appropriate strategy. Calm down, calm down. Let's think things through. This bastard is like a turtle. No matter how much power I put into my attacks, he always blocks them with his strange rings. Especially when he stacks them together. Once he does that, breaking his defenses becomes impossible. Damn it, what should I do? Glancing around the arena for anything that could help him, he soon took a look at the ground and finally noticed something. Holes with the imprints of his saws appeared all over the floor of the arena. Are my attack patterns too predictable? Taking a better look at the surroundings, Alex noticed that whenever he attacked he would leave imprints of his foot on the ground. And the one thing he managed to notice as he looked at the arena was that he had only been attacking from the front. His footprints would only be left whenever he propelled his body forward in a straight line. He had done so to maximize his speed, but he now realized that because of that his attacks had become predictable. With him just charging from the front, his attack range became much more narrow, making it easier for the opponent to defend against. This was a serious flaw. What if he suddenly switched attack patterns and made them harder to predict? As his thoughts reached that far, gripping onto his spear, Alex once again dashed in my direction. This time, his movements were quite complex. Like a crab, he zigzagged as he steadily charged forward. His movements weren't as predictable, as it had no set pattern. A stark contrast to before when he would directly lunge in my direction. It was obvious that he knew that just brute forcing his way through wasn't going to give him the win. Although I was surprised by his sudden actions, it was all futile on his end. It didn't matter if he made it hard for me to predict his movements. I didn't need to predict in the first place. Swoosh. 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 Gesturing with my hands, the rings revolving around me moved and surrounded Alex, restricting his movements. Ah. Fuck. With the rings around him, Alex could only helplessly stop trying to move in a zigzag pattern, and charge at me directly. Damn it, fight me already. It's time to release the bait. Noticing Alex becoming increasingly frustrated by my fighting style, I knew it was time to end the match. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In one swift and fast movement, jumbling up the rings together, with 2 rings at the bottom and 1 at the top, I formed a triangle. With a movement of my hand, the triangle started rotating in front of me, creating a large defensive shield. However, if one looked closely, although the shield looked huge and impenetrable, there was a small gap in the middle of it. Small enough for a human to fit in. That was on purpose. The reason I rotated the ring wasn't so that it would create a visual image of a pure shield, no, it was done so that Alex would assume I was covering up the small flaw. Halt. And just like I predicted, halting his steps, Alex stared at the large ring before him. Noticing something, his previous grim expression disappeared and a smirk appeared on his face. It looks like God has not given up on me. Tensing his calves, Alex propelled his body forward. Boom. Creating 2 small craters on the ground beneath his feet, the sound of an explosion resounded throughout the arena as Alex disappeared from where he was standing. In an instant, he appeared before the shield. Whilst in the air, stabbing his spear forward, Alex leaned his body forward and smoothly dived into the ring, appearing right before me. Smiling manically, he shouted. Die. Watching the tip of the spears nearing my face, I grinned. So predictable. Sidestepping, narrowingly avoiding the spear as it grazed my shoulder, I briefly made eye contact with Alex. Smiling, coating my fist with mana, I threw an uppercut towards Alex who was still in the air. Bomb. Kuwawa. Although he tried to avoid my fist, in the end, because he was moving too fast, it still connected. As my fist hit his stomach, a large shockwave swept the arena and Alex's eyes became dyed in white for a split second. Thud. Dropping on the ground hard, holding onto his stomach, green liquid escaped from Alex's mouth as he constantly gagged. Barf. Barf. KHHH. Arriving in front of Alex, stepping on his face, I looked down on him and smirked. Slowly the white glow around me intensified. Vroom. Soon my F-ranked pressure enveloped the whole arena, causing Alex who was on the ground to open his eyes wide. How? You? Smiling at him, I nodded my head. Yeah, I never considered you an opponent to begin with. Gotcha. Stomping onto his face once, Alex passed out on the ground. Foo. Taking a deep breath, I looked towards my surroundings. Silence. Everything around me was silent. Be it the referee, the audience, Martin, or my parents. No one spoke. Only silence prevailed in the arena. Not paying my mind to it. I once again looked down on Alex. I guess you really were right about us being in completely different worlds.